Welcome to Uncloseted Conversations. Even if you stumbled upon this channel by accident, you are welcome here. The stories here are from my heart, from my soul, from my pen to your ears. I hope that you will stay a little longer and open yourself to the magic of storytelling. Here I write fiction, and though not always aligning with reality, it still tugs at heartstrings. Stories are escapes and sometimes a balm to the soul. So, enjoy your time here, and if reality presses down too loud and too hard, come knock at the door, come in, take a seat, grab a coffee, and just exhale. These are veil-bound stories, and the space is free and non-judgmental. Sit back, earphones or pods in, and let's listen to another exquisite romance. Hearts in the Shadows. Where shadows linger, legacy binds them, hearts finally find each other. When Medina Sidonia's most powerful man dies, secrets buried for decades rise like smoke. Daniela Sofia Sharana finds herself trapped in a web of betrayal, her own family's ambition turning her life upside down. But in the shadows, someone has been watching all along, someone who knows her better than she knows herself. As the city heals and her father's legacy demands justice, Dani must navigate a world of suspicion, power, and whispered truths, and discover a love that has been waiting patiently, quietly, in the background of her life. Passion, trust, and destiny collide in a story of courage, surrender, and the slow-burning intimacy that can only be forged in the shadows. Chapter 1. Santi laid to rest. The world watched as the most powerful man in the city was laid to rest. The name Sharana was synonymous with power and money, and in Medina Sidonia, Santi saint to all. Ask anyone about Luis Miguel Sharana and you would hear nothing but praise. New schools built. Communities enriched. The poor uplifted. These were his monuments. These were the stories polished smooth for public memory. The funeral procession moved slowly through the city, a measured crawl of reverence. Streets were lined with garlands, flowers, and crosses. People stood shoulder to shoulder in veneration as hope itself was carried toward the earth. Among them, almost invisible, stood a tall figure folded into the shadows, dressed in black to dissolve into stone and silence. She was not watching the coffin, not the procession. Her gaze followed the woman walking behind everyone else. She catalogued every detail, the slight slump of shoulders, the tremble in hands clutching flowers too tightly, the eyes that refused to lift. She saw what others did not. What grief had stripped away. The fierce posture. The unbending spine. The woman who once walked like nothing could touch her. At the graveside, silence fell over the city as the coffin descended. This was where Santi would become one with the soil he guarded so fiercely, paid for with his last breath. Luis Miguel Sharana, they said, had died of a heart attack. Unexpected. Unavoidable. A lie neat enough to bury. The woman in the shadows knew better. She knew the truth. Knew the secrets they were lowering into the ground alongside him. The priest spoke his final blessing, and the world held its breath. Still, she waited. She watched mourners drift away, watched doors close and lives resume, watched until only one woman remained. Soon, she would make contact. Soon, she would speak. Soon, Spain would remember what it had chosen to forget. But not yet. The sun sank toward the horizon, a final exhale from man once loved. Soon the city would move on. Santi would become a name, then a story, then dust. She watched the woman straighten her back, dry her tears, and walk down the hill alone. Only then did she step forward. She placed a single white rose on the fresh soil and whispered, "Cumplir mi promesa." I will keep my promise. She lingered as the last light faded, watching heaven receive a leader and hell quietly prepare its answer. Chapter 2. A Daughter's Sacrifice. In the old Spanish villa, silence had a name. Daniela Sofia Sharana. She sat at the oak table, spine rigid, hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her sat her uncle, flanked by two lawyers and a business associate who smelled faintly of ambition and old money. Papers lay between them like a battlefield already lost. Vicente Serrana's voice carried the tone of rehearsed sympathy. Daniela, this is the only way. Luis never cared for the business. He wasted so much. Her voice cut him cleanly in half. Be very careful, Danny said, ice wrapped in velvet. You will not spit on my father's grave. Stick to the facts. Vicente was a cruel man, always had been. Where Luis invested in people, Vicente invested in leverage. Where one believed in legacy, the other believed in domination. They had argued for years. Little brother, Luis used to say, this community will carry you for generations if you're willing to put your hands in the soil. Vicente never wanted dirt under his nails. He wanted control. His underground dealings had been a constant thorn in Luis's side. Now, with his brother buried, Vicente finally stepped into the light, knife still warm behind his back. Danny stared at the papers. She saw her father's signature. She saw the losses, the concessions, the surrender dressed as necessity. What she did not see was the look Vicente exchanged with his lawyer. She did not see the blood. Not yet. Her fingers tightened around the pen. She closed her eyes, just briefly, as if Luis's voice might still linger in the villa. As if he might explain. Nothing answered. The ink bled into the paper. She stared at her signature before sliding the documents back across the table. Vicente smiled, wide, triumphant, vicious. In that moment, he became the executioner of Medina Sidonia. Danny left the study without a word. Her bags waited by the door. The house had already let her go. She stepped onto the porch and was met with cameras, uniforms, flashing lights. Confusion barely had time to form. Daniela Sofia Sharana, the police captain, announced, "You are under arrest for the murder of Luis Miguel Sharana." The handcuffs closed. Cold. Final. Behind her, Vicente stood tall, victor crowned in silence. The car pulled away. Danny never saw the paperwork buried in those documents. The falsified confession. The signature that damned her. She had not only surrendered her inheritance. She had signed her own conviction. Chapter 3. Prison becomes home. Daniela Sofia Sharana sat on the narrow prison bunk and tried to understand how a life could unravel so completely in 7 days. From controlmerant, head engineer in a classified unit of the Spanish Navy, to inmate. She was exhausted. Of grief. Of bloodlines. Of the name Sharana clinging to her like a curse. She had joined the Navy to disappear. To be useful. To build something that didn't carry her father's shadow. Ships made sense. Systems obeyed logic. Computers told the truth if you knew how to ask. People did not. 6 months later, she sat in a concrete box wondering when she had stopped seeing the knives. Sharana. You have a visitor. She frowned. No one knew she was here. Her unit didn't exist. That was the point. She followed the guard, shoulders heavy, footsteps slower than the woman she used to be. The booth door opened. Danny stopped. Behind the glass stood a woman who did not belong to this place. Long black hair. Steel gray eyes. Lips touched with the faintest red. Calm, not passive, but deliberate. Like someone who measured rooms before entering them. Danny sat. Picked up the handset. The woman mirrored her movement with unhurried precision. When she spoke, the sound didn't travel, it settled. Daniela Sharana, she said, voice low and melodic. I can prove your innocence. The name Stefania Genevefa Morabito had not yet entered Danny's world. But it was about to rearrange it completely. Chapter 4. The Shape of Doubt. Stefania did not rush. That alone unsettled Daniela. Most people who claimed they could save you arrived with urgency, voices raised, promises loud, hope dressed like a salesman. Stefania simply sat there, fingers relaxed around the handset, eyes steady. As if time itself answered to her. Danny studied her reflection in the glass, searching for the familiar markers of deception. Nervous hands. Shifting eyes. The tremor of someone lying for profit. She found none. You don't look like a lawyer, Danny said at last, sarcasm scraping against fatigue. Stefania's mouth curved, barely. Neither do you look like a murderer. Touché. What do you want? Danny asked. Because miracles usually come with invoices. Stefania leaned back. The chair creaked softly. Even the sound felt intentional. I want you to listen, she said. And I want you to not trust me. That earned her a sharp look. I'm serious, Stefania continued. Trust is expensive. Suspicion is free and far more useful right now. Danny exhaled a humorless breath. You walk into a prison and tell me you can prove my innocence, then ask me to doubt you? I'm asking you to survive, Stephania replied. Belief gets people killed. Questions keep them alive. A pause. Heavy. Measured. You signed documents the night your life ended, Stephania went on. Not because you're foolish, but because grief narrows vision. Your uncle knew that. The word uncle landed like a bruise being pressed. Danny's jaw tightened. You're making assumptions. I'm making deductions, Stephania said gently. Big difference. Danny leaned forward. Then deduce this. How do you know about the papers? They were sealed. Stephania smiled. Not kindly. Because the version you signed wasn't the only one drafted. Cold crept in where anger had lived. You're saying there are copies, Danny whispered. I'm saying there are layers, Stephania replied. And every layer has fingerprints. Danny studied her again, really studied her this time. The way she spoke like someone accustomed to secrets. The way she never wasted words. The way she hadn't once said, I promise. Who are you? Danny asked. Stephania's gaze didn't waver. Someone your father trusted enough to keep at arm's length. That did it. That's impossible, Danny snapped. My father didn't. Trust easily? Stephania finished. Yes. I know. Silence stretched. The air between them thickened with things unsaid. If you're lying, Danny said slowly, you're very good at it. Stephania inclined her head. If I were lying, I'd be asking you for something by now. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Time thinning. Your uncle is moving quickly, Stephania said. Power makes people reckless once they believe they've won. Danny swallowed. And you? Stephania stood. I move quietly. She placed her handset down, eyes locking with Danny's through the glass. Decide nothing yet, she said. Suspicion will tell you more than faith ever could. Then she turned and walked away, leaving behind not hope, but something sharper. A question. And for the first time since the handcuffs closed, Daniela Sofia Sharana felt it. Not salvation. Momentum. Chapter 5. The Dangerous Kind of Help. Doubt arrived quietly. It did not scream or accuse. It sat beside Daniela in the dark and asked polite questions. Long after Stephania had left, Danny lay on the narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every pause, every almost smile. People who wanted something always wanted it now. Stephania had wanted nothing, and that was the problem. No demand. No contract. No urgency. That made her dangerous. Danny rolled onto her side, the mattress sighing beneath her. In the Navy, you learned quickly, anyone who offered help without leverage already had it. Someone your father trusted enough to keep at arm's length. That line gnawed at her. Luis Miguel Sharana had lived his life in compartments, family, business, community, secrets. Danny had respected that. She had never pushed. But the idea that there was a woman moving through his orbit without her knowledge felt like discovering a hidden room in a house you grew up in. She sat up slowly. If Stephania knew her father, then she knew more than she was saying. And if she knew more, then Danny was already a piece on a board she couldn't see. The next morning, suspicion wore a uniform. A guard paused longer than necessary outside her cell. Another inmate glanced her way, then away, too quickly. Danny's instincts prickled. Patterns formed where there had been none yesterday. Someone had spoken. At breakfast, a woman slid onto the bench across from her. Late 30s. Scar above her brow. Eyes sharp with the currency of prison survival. You're the rich girl, she said. Not a question. Danny didn't answer. The woman smirked. Word is you've got a visitor. Fancy one. Danny's hand stilled around her cup. Prison gossip moves fast. Only when paid, the woman replied. So, who's paying for yours? That settled like a weight in Danny's chest. Back in her cell, she paced. Stephania's calm suddenly felt less reassuring, more strategic. Had she announced herself too loudly? Had her presence already shifted the balance inside these walls? Help, Danny knew, was never neutral. That afternoon, the guard returned. You have another visitor. Danny almost laughed. The booth felt smaller this time. The glass thicker. Stephania stood exactly where she had before, Immaculate, unbothered, as if nothing in the world could touch her unless she allowed it. Danny picked up the handset but did not sit. "You didn't tell me you'd make me visible," Danny said. Stefania's eyes flicked, just once, to the guard outside. "I told you not to trust me," she replied calmly. "That's not an answer." "No," Stefania agreed. "It's a warning." Danny finally Saturday, people are watching me now. Talking. That puts me in danger. Stefania leaned closer to the glass. People were always watching you, Daniela. You simply mistook silence for safety. Danny's voice dropped. Are you helping me or using me? For the first time, Stefania hesitated. Not long. Just enough. I am doing both, she said. There it was. Clean. Honest. Uncomfortable. Danny exhaled slowly. Then we're not allies. Stefania smiled, not sharp, not soft. Something older. Allies are for wars fought in daylight, she said. What's coming for you will happen in corridors and contracts and quiet rooms. She straightened. Doubt me. You should. Just don't underestimate me. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing, Stefania added. Your uncle has already ordered your conviction celebrated. He believes you're finished. Danny's eyes burned. Stefania met her gaze. The most dangerous moment is when a man stops checking his locks. Then she was gone again, leaving Daniela with a truth she didn't want and a suspicion she could no longer ignore. Because if Stefania was dangerous, then she might be exactly what this blood feud required. Chapter 6. Stress Testing the Truth. Daniela Sofia Sharana did not sleep that night. She mapped. In the Navy, you learned early, when you don't trust the system, you stress it. You introduce variables. You watch where it bends, where it fractures, where it lies. Stefania Genoveva Morabito was a system. Elegant. Controlled. Closed. Which meant she had seams. By morning, Danny had a plan. At recreation, she moved deliberately, changed routines, lingered where she normally passed through, spoke just loudly enough to be overheard. She let fragments slip. My uncle's lawyer handled the documents. There was a second signature page. I don't think the copies were destroyed. Each sentence was bait. Carefully weighted. Slightly wrong. By afternoon, the ripples arrived. A guard checked her cell twice. Another inmate suddenly decided she wasn't worth sitting near. Information was moving, and it was moving fast. Good. That meant Stefania's reach extended further than she admitted. The summons came before dusk. You have a visitor. This time, Danny smiled. The booth door closed. Stefania stood on the other side of the glass, eyes already searching Danny's face. You're testing me, Stefania said, before Danny could speak. Danny picked up the handset, calm as a countdown. You noticed. I noticed the guards adjusting their behavior, Stefania replied. And the misinformation traveling too cleanly to be organic. A pause. Well done. Danny leaned back. You didn't correct it. Stefania's brow arched. I didn't need to. That means you're listening, Danny said. Not reacting. Correct. Which means, Danny continued, you already know what's real and what isn't. Stefania smiled slowly. Now you're thinking like an engineer. Danny's gaze sharpened. So, tell me, did my false trail reach my uncle? Stefania tilted her head. No. Danny's smile faded. That's not good. On the contrary, Stefania said. It tells us something important. That Vicente's network is tighter than we thought? No, Stefania corrected gently. That mine is. Silence cracked between them. Danny stood. You said distrust keeps people alive. It does. Then here's mine, Danny said. If you truly wanted to help me, you would have let that misinformation leak all the way to Vicente. Stefania's eyes gleamed. And burn a channel I may need later? So, you admit you're managing assets, Danny said. Including me. Stefania didn't deny it. She stepped closer to the glass. Yes, she said. And you just proved why. Danny exhaled sharply through her nose. I baited 3 lies. You intercepted 2 and ignored 1. Stefania's lips curved. You noticed. The one you ignored mentioned a second signature page, Danny said. You didn't flinch. Stefania went still. Just for a fraction. There it was. You already know about it, Danny said quietly. Which means my father anticipated this. Stefania's voice lowered. Luis Miguel planned for contingencies, including betrayal by blood. Danny's chest tightened. Then why didn't you stop it? Because plans, Stefania replied, require time. And sacrifices. Danny's laugh was sharp, bitter. I'm the sacrifice. Stefania met her gaze without apology. Yes. The honesty hit harder than any lie. Danny straightened. Then here's my condition. Stefania waited. You don't move me without telling me why, Danny said. You don't speak for me. And you don't make me visible unless I agree. Stefania considered her. Measured. Calculated. Then she nodded. Accepted. Danny tilted her head. That was easy. Stefania smiled, dangerous and approving. Because you passed the test. They stared at each other through reinforced glass, two women who did not trust, but understood. And that, Danny knew, was far more lethal. Chapter 7. The Thing He Left Behind. The message arrived disguised as nothing. That was the first sign it mattered. Stefania received it at dawn, folded into the margins of a legal brief she hadn't requested. No seal. No signature. Just a sequence of numbers written in a hand she knew too well. She closed the folder without a flicker of reaction. Luis always preferred elegance over drama. By the time Daniela was escorted to the visitor's booth that afternoon, Stefania had already walked the perimeter of the contingency, mapped its intent, its risks, and its cost. She did not look pleased. Danny noticed immediately. You look like someone just reached out from the grave, Danny said dryly as she picked up the handset. Stefania exhaled through her nose. Your father hated theatrics. And yet, Danny replied, here we are. Stefania slid a folded scrap of paper under the glass. The guard pretended not to see it. That, too, was information. Danny unfolded it carefully. See 17/Alcazar/420. That's it? Danny asked. No, my beloved daughter? No confession? No dramatic monologue? Stefania's mouth twitched. Luis trusted intelligence, not sentiment. Danny studied the code. Her Navy instincts stirred, coordinates, compartments, routines. C-17 is a locker designation, she said slowly. Naval registry format. Stefania nodded. And Alcazar is not the castle people think of. It's a decommissioned dry dock outside Cadiz. Officially sealed. Unofficially forgotten. And 420? Danny asked. Stefania's eyes sharpened. Window of access. Once every 6 months. You missed the last one. Danny smiled faintly. Of course I did. Silence settled. He planned for Vicente, Danny said quietly. Didn't he? He planned for betrayal, Stefania corrected. He didn't care from whom. Danny's fingers tightened around the paper. Why no? Stefania hesitated. Then answered honestly. Because you signed the documents. The word stung. He knew, Danny whispered. He suspected, Stefania said gently. And he knew you would be protected by your own integrity long enough for this to activate. Danny laughed once, short and sharp. My father built a dead man's switch and didn't tell me. He built several, Stefania replied. This is just the one tied to you. Danny looked up. What's in the locker? Stefania met her gaze. Proof. Of what? Of who your uncle really is, Stefania said. And of who your father truly was. Danny leaned back, breath slow, mind already racing through logistics. And you waited until now to tell me? Stefania's voice lowered. Because once you open that locker, there's no version of this where you walk free quietly. Danny smiled, not happy, not afraid. Resolved. I was never going to, she said. Stefania watched her carefully. You understand what this means? Danny nodded. It means my father trusted me to finish what he started. She folded the paper and slid it into her sleeve. Outside, somewhere beyond stone and steel, Vicente Shrana was celebrating a victory he did not yet realize had an expiration date. And in a forgotten dock by the sea, a locker waited. Patient as truth always is. Chapter 8. Extraction Protocol. Daniela did not ask if it could be done. She asked how many steps it would take to break the illusion that it couldn't. Prison, she knew, was not a fortress. It was a machine. And every machine, no matter how brutal, ran on routine, compliance, and the arrogance of believing no one inside it was smarter than the system itself. She sat on her bunk that night, tapping the wall softly, counting seconds between footsteps, listening to the rhythm of keys, doors, breath. Patterns emerged. They always did. The guard rotation changed every 90 minutes. The cameras blinked, not continuously, but in half-second resets masked by software smoothing. The intake terminal near medical was old. Too old. Running patched firmware layered over legacy code. Someone had been lazy. Danny smiled. The next morning, she requested medical. Migraines. Light sensitivity. Navy paperwork helped. Authority lingered in the language of forms even when stripped of rank. By afternoon, she was sitting under harsh fluorescence, wrists free, eyes lowered. The terminal hummed beside her. That was the moment Stefania chose to appear. "You're early," Danny murmured without looking up. "You're predictable," Stefania replied quietly. Engineers always move toward the weakest node. Danny glanced at her. "You said extraction wouldn't be quiet." "I said it wouldn't be clean," Stefania corrected. She slid a thin object across the counter, no larger than a SIM card. "Ghost key," Stefania said. "Temporary." 37 seconds of invisibility across internal systems. Danny picked it up, weighing it between fingers. "You said you wouldn't move me without telling me why." "I'm not moving you," Stefania replied. "I'm letting you move yourself." A pause. C-17 opens at 4:20, Stefania continued. "You'll have 6 minutes before maritime surveillance reinitializes." Danny's jaw tightened. "I'm still incarcerated." Stefania's eyes flicked to the terminal. "For now." Danny looked at the screen again. Old code. Familiar structure. Someone had copied a naval subsystem years ago and never updated it properly. She cracked her knuckles. 3 minutes, Danny said. "I can buy myself 3 minutes." "Do it in 2, Stefania replied calmly. "Chaos eats margins." Danny's fingers flew. Not hacking, correcting. She rerouted permissions through a maintenance protocol buried under years of neglect. The screen blinked. Once. Twice. Access granted. Somewhere in the prison, a door unlocked itself quietly. Danny stood. "You'll be marked," she said to Stefania. Stefania smiled faintly. "I was born marked." They walked, unhurried, unremarkable, through corridors that believed in their own authority too much to question motion. At the service exit, Stefania stopped. "This is where I disappear," she said. "From here, you're alone." Danny hesitated. "If this is a trap." "It isn't," Stefania said. "Traps require certainty. This requires courage." They held each other's gaze. No trust. No faith. Just alignment. Danny slipped into the night. By the time the alarms realized they had missed her, Daniela Sofia Sharana was already gone, moving toward the sea, toward a locker sealed by a dead man who loved her enough to prepare for the worst. Behind her, prison lights flared and sirens woke the dark. Ahead of her, C-17 waited. And somewhere, Vicente Sharana slept soundly, unaware that the system he relied on had just been re-engineered. Chapter 9. The Impossible Escape. The sirens didn't scream immediately. They hesitated. Prisons, like men who believe they are in control, always hesitate when reality contradicts expectation. By the time alarms cut through the night, Daniela Sofia Sharana was already a ghost moving through streets that didn't know her name anymore. She kept to shadows, breath steady, stride unhurried. Panic was loud. Precision was silent. She ditched the prison-issued jacket 3 blocks out. Tore it once, hard, to make it look like desperation. Let someone else find it and tell the wrong story. By dawn, the impossible had become undeniable. The headline hit first. Navy engineer escapes high-security custody. Questions mount over system failure. In Vicente Serrana's penthouse, espresso cooled untouched. He stared at the screen, reading the same sentence for the 3rd time. His smile, the one he wore like a crown, did not return. "That's not possible," he said calmly. The man across from him shifted. "The reports are consistent." Vicente's jaw tightened. "She's an engineer, not a magician." No signs of forced entry. No violence. No accomplices identified. Vicente stood slowly, walked to the window. Medina Sidonia looked peaceful below, unaware it had just lost its illusion of order. Then someone helped her, he said. Yes. Vicente exhaled through his nose. Find them. In the prison, chaos reigned, but quietly. Quiet chaos was worse. Doors locked and unlocked without explanation. Guards were questioned by men who didn't wear uniforms. Servers were seized. Logs disappeared. Someone higher up was embarrassed. Embarrassment breeds cruelty. Back in the streets, Danny listened to the city wake. Radios murmured disbelief. Cafes buzzed. Her name tasted different in other people's mouths now, not murderer, not daughter. Problem. She ducked into a narrow alley and checked the burner Stefania had insisted she take. One message. You did exactly what they said you couldn't. Now they will overcorrect. Move. Danny smiled thinly. Overcorrection was predictable. It narrowed vision. Made men like Vicente dangerous and sloppy. She changed routes twice. Crossed a market. Boarded a bus she didn't need. Got off 3 stops later. By the time Vicente's people triangulated her last known location, she was already heading south, toward salt air and old steel and a promise written by a dead man. And in a darkened office overlooking the city, Vicente Sharana finally said the word he hated most. Find her. Because the impossible escape wasn't just a failure of walls and locks. It was a message. And it said, you never had her. Chapter 10, C-17 Dawn. The horizon bled pink and gold, the tide moving like liquid glass. Daniela Sofia Sharana stood on the edge of the decommissioned dry dock, the salt air stinging her skin, the locker before her like a heartbeat suspended in metal. C-17. The code her father had left. The pulse in the dock. The lock waiting. She crouched, gloves sliding over steel, fingertips tracing the edges of the weathered padlock. A faint sequence tapped in her mind, memorized from the scraps Stefania had whispered. Time was measured in breaths. Not minutes. Breaths. For 19. She held the ghost key in her palm, a tiny sliver of possibility. She slid it into the locker's reader. Nothing. A hum. Then a blink. Then the lock clicked. For 20. She exhaled slowly, the first real air she had tasted since the prison cell. The locker door swung open. Inside, layers of envelopes and folders, carefully organized, sealed with wax and stamped with Luis Miguel's insignia. No gimmicks. No theatrics. Just truth waiting for the one he trusted most. Danny's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the first envelope. Her father's handwriting, meticulous, deliberate. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and salt. She opened it. Names. Dates. Evidence of Vicente's schemes. Offshore accounts. Bribes. Records of forged documents. Photographs of clandestine meetings. Every step her uncle had taken to steal the city from her father's legacy, chronicled like a map to ruin him. And then a final letter. Daniela, my daughter, my pride, my shadow. If you are reading this, the world has betrayed you faster than you expected. Know this. The city, our family, the honor of our name, it is yours to reclaim. But beware the man you call uncle. He believes he is untouchable. Let him think that. And above all, trust no one fully, not even those who claim to help. Your survival is not in faith, it is in calculation, patience, and timing. Finish what I started. Finish it clean. Danny folded the letter, her chest tight with fire and grief. The tide shifted behind her. Waves slapped against the dock like the rhythm of a pulse she could almost feel, her father's pulse, still beating through the legacy he left behind. Stefania's voice came from behind, soft, certain. Everything you need is here, she said. Now it's your move. Danny turned. Her hair whipped in the salt breeze, eyes narrowed, body poised. Then let's begin. Stefania smiled faintly. Vicente will never see you coming. The sun broke fully over the horizon, casting long shadows over steel and salt. The city slept, unaware of the storm about to awaken within it. And at that moment, Daniela Sofia Sharana was no longer a prisoner, no longer the hunted, no longer the victim. She was the storm. Chapter 11. When Power Feels the Cold. Vicente Sharana hated silence. It meant things were moving without him. The penthouse was immaculate, glass and marble catching the early light, but Vicente paced like a man trapped in a room that had begun to shrink. His phone lay on the table, screen dark. Too dark. She escaped custody, he said again, slower this time. Then vanished. The man across from him, one of his long-trusted fixers, shifted uncomfortably. Yes. And now? Vicente snapped. No confirmed sightings. No transactions. No border alerts. Vicente's jaw flexed. Which means someone is suppressing them. Yes. Vicente turned toward the window, staring down at Medina Sidonia. This city had always answered to him. It bent. It complied. It remembered who fed it. Or so he thought. She shouldn't be capable of this, he muttered. She's an engineer. Quiet. Predictable. Engineers, the fixer said carefully, solve problems. Vicente shot him a look sharp enough to draw blood. Then why wasn't this solved? A beat. She's not alone. The words landed like a hairline fracture. Vicente inhaled slowly, the way men did when they refused to panic. Who? The fixer hesitated. That hesitation was new. Dangerous. There are signs of legal interference. Old ones. Predated contracts. Shell oversight that doesn't belong to any current firm. Vicente's fingers curled. My brother. The room chilled. Luis Miguel had always been meticulous. Patient. The kind of man who planned exits long before entrances. Vicente had despised that about him. Find out what he left behind, Vicente ordered. Every document. Every vault. Every name he ever trusted. We've already. Then you haven't looked hard enough, Vicente cut in. Dead men don't stay silent unless someone helps them. His phone finally buzzed. One message. No sender. C-17 opened. Vicente froze. Blood drained from his face, replaced by something far more honest. Fear. He stared at the screen as if it might explain itself. That doc was sealed, he whispered. No, the fixer said quietly. It was forgotten. Vicente slammed the phone down. Lock everything. Accounts. Ports. Media. I want her story buried so deep it suffocates. And the woman helping her? Vicente's smile returned, but thinner now. Sharp at the edges. Find her, he said. I don't care who she is or who she works for. Cut the head off and the body will follow. Outside, the city gleamed, unaware that its shadow ruler had just realized something unforgivable. Luis Miguel Sharana had not lost. He had delayed. And his daughter was now holding the clock. Chapter 12. The First Wrong Move. Vicente Sharana did not sleep. He called instead. By mid-morning, the city was humming with activity that looked like order, but smelled like panic. Accounts were frozen without explanation. Permits delayed. Containers held at port for routine inspection. Journalists received anonymous tips, too many, too eager. He was tightening everything at once. And in doing so, he exposed the seams. Release a statement, Vicente ordered, pacing. About Daniela. Emphasize her instability. Grief. Mental decline. Make it compassionate. The fixer hesitated. She's already escaped custody. That narrative. Will stick if repeated, Vicente snapped. Truth is irrelevant. Timing is not. The statement went out before noon. Too fast. By afternoon, something unexpected happened. It didn't land. People read it, reread it, and frowned. Because grief didn't explain forged documents. Because instability didn't explain a prison system failing silently. Because Luis Miguel Sharana had taught the city to smell corruption even when it wore clean clothes. At the port, a dock supervisor made a call he hadn't planned to make. At City Hall, an old councilwoman quietly requested archived permits. And somewhere between coffee and conscience, a journalist asked the wrong question out loud. If Daniela is guilty, why is everyone trying so hard to silence her now? Vicente felt it like a pressure change. What do you mean accounts are locked internally? He demanded. They're not responding to override, his financial officer said. As if they're waiting for secondary authorization. Vicente's blood went cold. From whom? The officer swallowed. From a contingency signer. Vicente slammed his fist into the desk. There is no contingency signer. There was a pause on the line. Yes, the officer said carefully. There is. Luis Miguel registered 1 year ago. Dormant. Never used. Vicente closed his eyes. Of course he had. That was the mistake. By pulling too hard, Vicente had awakened systems designed to respond only when abused. By trying to bury Daniela, he had triggered protections meant to preserve the truth. By moving publicly, he had forced private players to look twice. And somewhere by the sea, Daniela Sofia Sharana felt her burner vibrate. One message. He's tightening the net. Which means he's caught in it. Your father anticipated this. Danny smiled, slow, dangerous. Thank you, she murmured to no one. For confirming. Because Vicente's first fatal mistake wasn't cruelty. It wasn't greed. It was believing that fear made him stronger. It didn't. It made him visible. Chapter 13. A Small Adjustment. Daniela Sofia Sharana did not go after her uncle directly. That would have been loud. Instead, she adjusted a variable. In her father's files, buried beneath offshore accounts and falsified contracts, was something far more delicate, a maintenance schedule. A series of port inspections Vicente had rerouted years ago, small exemptions, signed with confidence, renewed with habit. The kind of thing no one questioned. Danny smiled to herself. There you are. She sat in the quiet of a borrowed room, laptop balanced on her knees, sea air drifting through cracked windows. Stefania watched from the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. She knew better than to interrupt an engineer mid-solution. You're not attacking him, Stefania finally said. I am, Danny replied calmly. Just not where he expects. Her fingers danced. Not hacking. Never hacking. She merely restored original parameters, reinstated inspections Vicente had bypassed. One click. Another. The system accepted the changes without protest. It remembered what it was meant to be before greed edited it. Done, Danny said softly. What does that do? Stefania asked. Danny leaned back. It reintroduces accountability. At the port, the effect was immediate. A container flagged. Then another. Then a third. Nothing dramatic. Just red lines appearing where there had been none. Inside one of those containers sat equipment registered under 3 shell companies Vicente controlled. Equipment that did not match manifests. Equipment that, under scrutiny, told stories he had paid to keep quiet. By sunset, the Port Authority made a call it hadn't made in years. By nightfall, Customs opened a file. By morning, Vicente's phone began ringing with a tone that did not invite refusal. In his office, Vicente stared at the report, lips pressed thin. This is routine, he said. Why is this routine suddenly a problem? The fixer's voice was tight. Because routine only works when no one looks. Vicente's fingers trembled, just once. Contain it. We're trying. Trying. That word again. Back by the sea, Danny closed the laptop and finally allowed herself a breath. That was subtle, Stefania said. That was a test, Danny replied. I wanted to see how fast he bleeds when I touch the infrastructure. And? He's hemorrhaging, Danny said evenly. And he doesn't know where the wound is. Stefania studied her, something like admiration flickering in her eyes. You just made him visible to people who don't answer to him. Danny nodded. First strike. Small. Deniable. She stood, shoulders straight, eyes steady. Next, she said, we go after something he loves. Stefania smiled, slow and sharp. Now you're thinking like your father. Outside, the sea rolled in patient, inevitable. And in Medina Sidonia, Vicente Sharana began to understand something far more terrifying than opposition. This wasn't chaos. This was design. Chapter 14. The Hand Behind the Curtain. Stefania Genoveffa Morabito did not need a title. She never did. She moved in spaces where power whispered, not roared. But even she had leverage, and it was finally time to show it. In the quiet of the safe house overlooking the dock, the sea stretching beyond the horizon, Stefania stepped close to Danny. Not too close, just enough for presence to press like gravity. You know why I agreed to help you, Stefania said softly, voice low measured. But I need you to understand the full picture. You're not the only one fighting for this city, or for yourself. Danny's eyes, sharp and tired from weeks of calculation, lifted. What do you mean? I mean, Stefania continued, that I have resources you can't see yet. People who answer only to me, not to Vicente, not to anyone in the city council, not even to the Navy. I have access to data streams, financial logs, and legal blind spots, all clean, all deniable. Danny leaned back, expression neutral. And you're showing me this? Why? Stefania's gaze softened, just slightly, before hardening again. Because without it, you'll bleed before you strike. With it, you control the tempo. You decide how the city sees you. You decide what dies first, your father's legacy, or Vicente's pride. Danny's lips curled faintly, approving. Then you're more than a lawyer. Yes, Stefania said, almost a whisper. I'm your leverage. For a heartbeat, Danny wondered if Stefania meant loyalty, skill, or something else entirely. She pushed the thought aside. Focus first. Emotions later. But Stefania's eyes lingered, something untold, something dangerous. And in that glance was the faintest trace of history. College days, late-night study sessions, quiet glances, unspoken alliances. Danny didn't know it, but her father had. Luis Miguel Sharana had seen Stefania in ways Danny could not. Seen the devotion. The promise. The quiet fire that burned behind her lawyer's calm. He had made her swear, decades ago, to protect his daughter no matter the cost. And Stefania had kept that promise, through every shadowed corridor, every manipulation, every strategic calculation. Are you attached to me? Danny asked suddenly, eyes narrowing, curious. Stefania's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. Attached? Perhaps. But right now, that's irrelevant. Danny studied her, wondering what she was allowed to know, and what she wasn't. Stefania reached for the papers on the table, sliding them toward Danny. Bank transfers, shell companies, hidden assets, legal blind spots. All of them ready to use, all of them traceable only to Stefania. Use it wisely, Stefania said. Because Vicente doesn't know me, and if he did, you'd already be dead. Danny picked up the files, exhaled slowly, letting the weight settle. Then we start. Stefania's eyes softened again, for the briefest fraction of a second, just enough to hint at everything unspoken. And as they prepared their first joint strike, Stefania's hidden heart remained a silent promise, tethered to Danny by the shadow of a man who had died believing his daughter deserved nothing less than absolute protection. Chapter 15. The first cut is silent. The first attack didn't look like an attack at all. No guns. No sirens. No blood. Just numbers, quietly rearranging themselves. By sunrise, Vicente Alvarez's empire began to stutter. At 5:42, 3 shipping manifests were flagged for routine compliance review. At 6:10, a customs officer he'd bribed for 12 years was reassigned without notice. By 7 o'clock, 2 offshore accounts, clean, ancient, untouchable, froze like winter glass. Vicente felt it before he understood it. Power always does. He stood at his office window, coffee untouched, jaw tight. Who moved first? He snapped. No one answered. That silence was the answer. Meanwhile, Danny watched the city wake from the safe house balcony, hands wrapped around black coffee, posture relaxed, but her eyes were hunting. Stefania stood beside her, tablet in hand, calm as a confessional. Phase 1 complete, Stefania said. No fingerprints. No narrative. Just inconvenience. Danny exhaled. He'll assume bureaucracy. For the next 3 hours, Stefania replied. Then paranoia sets in. Danny smirked. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying accuracy, Stefania corrected. Chaos is sloppy. This is surgical. She turned the screen toward Danny. A timeline bloomed, transactions, political favors, family-owned subsidiaries Vicente had buried so deep even his sons didn't know where all the bones were. You're hitting his money, Danny said. No, Stefania replied softly. I'm hitting his confidence. The second cut. By mid-morning, whispers started. Dock workers weren't paid on time. A union rep asked questions. A journalist received an anonymous packet, just enough truth to smell real, not enough to publish yet. Vicente's phone rang nonstop. Wrong people. Too early. Too coordinated. He slammed his hand on the desk. Find out who's doing this. They didn't do anything, his aide said nervously. Legally, everything looks compliant. Vicente's eyes darkened. That was worse. Back at the safe house, Danny reviewed the flow of reactions like a battlefield map. He's tightening, she said, pulling inward. Yes, Stefania replied. Which means he'll make a mistake. Danny tilted her head, studying her. You plan this like you've known him a long time. Stefania met her gaze. Held it. I know men like him. A beat passed. Something unspoken stretched between them. Danny broke it first. What's phase 2? Stefania smiled, not kind, not cruel. Certain. Phase 2, she said, is when he starts bleeding allies. She tapped the screen again. 3 names appeared. Each one loyal. Each one about to doubt. We don't destroy him yet, Stefania continued. We let him watch his house rot from the inside. Danny's grin was sharp. Navy sharp. Then let's rot it beautifully. Chapter 16. The Fall of a Man Who Mistook Noise for Power. Vicente Alvarez died the way he lived. Surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. By the time he realized what was happening, it was already over. The dock inspection that morning wasn't routine, it was layered. Customs, maritime safety, financial oversight, environmental compliance. Each agency blind to the others, each following the letter of the law with almost poetic cruelty. Vicente barked orders. Threatened. Promised favors he no longer controlled. Nothing moved. At 1417, his primary shipping license was suspended. At 1423, a judge signed an emergency seizure order. At 1441, the press finally published. He stared at the headline like it had betrayed him personally. Family Feud exposes decades-long criminal network at city docks. His sons didn't answer his calls. His allies didn't return his messages. And then the final insult. A knock. Not loud. Not urgent. Just polite. The officer read the charges with professional boredom. Vicente didn't resist. He couldn't. His empire had already abandoned him. As they led him away, Vicente looked back at the water, the docks he thought belonged to him. They never had. Somewhere across the city, Danny exhaled and let the weight drop from her shoulders. Confirmed, she said. He's done. Stefania closed the tablet. He was done the moment he underestimated you. Chapter 17. The Woman Who Was Always There. Night settled gently, like the city itself was finally breathing again. Danny stood on the balcony, hair loose, jacket discarded, the sharpness in her posture softened for the first time in weeks. You didn't have to stay, she said without turning. Stefania joined her anyway. I know. Silence stretched, not awkward, just loaded. Danny took a slow sip of wine. You're a strange constant, Stefania. You appear when things break. You disappear when they're stable. Stefania smiled faintly. I prefer the margins. Danny turned then, studying her. Why me? The question landed softly, but it was heavy. Stefania looked out over the city. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, because some people don't need to be pushed forward, she said. They need to be protected until they're ready. Danny frowned slightly. You speak like you've known me a long time. Stefania inhaled. This was the edge. I've known of you a long time, she corrected gently. Danny's brow furrowed. From my father? Yes and no. A pause. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Danny's face. He spoke about you, Stefania continued. About your stubbornness. Your instinct to run toward danger. He worried you'd burn too bright without cover. Danny scoffed softly. Sounds like him. Stefania turned to face her fully now. The city lights painted gold along her cheekbones. There are people, she said quietly, whose paths don't cross because one of them is meant to walk the outer circle. Watching. Clearing obstacles. Holding doors open before they're ever reached. Danny held her gaze. And you were one of those people. Yes. The admission sat between them, intimate, unsettling, undeniable. Danny's voice lowered. How long? Stephania hesitated, just enough to be honest without saying everything. Long enough to know you'd survive this, she said. Long enough to know you didn't need saving. Danny searched her face, sensing there was more, but choosing, for now, not to pull the thread. Well, she said, a crooked smile returning, I suppose I owe you a drink. Stephania's answering smile was softer than anything she'd shown before. I'll accept. Because some loves don't announce themselves. They wait. They guard. They endure. Chapter 18. The Shadow in the Margins. Days passed, but the city never stopped whispering. Danny noticed it first in the small, almost imperceptible ways. A file left open on her father's laptop, containing just the right hint she needed. A port contact calling back almost before she finished leaving a message. Patterns she would have dismissed as coincidence, now lining up like constellations. Her mind, trained to detect systems, efficiency, and hidden threads, began to piece together the puzzle. Someone had always been there. At first, she suspected Luis's contingency plans. His genius was all-encompassing, his foresight unmatched. But as she traced events further, the signs started pointing to a presence she had never consciously noticed. Dinner at the safe house. The door opened a fraction before she expected a delivery, just enough for a shadow to fall along the wall. Danny turned sharply, catching only movement, never a face. An encrypted message on her phone and signed, precise, timing perfectly aligned with her own calculations. Every detail that had gone smoothly during her escape, every legal loophole Stephania had hinted at, every minor yet critical adjustment to Vicente's network. All of it now formed a single truth she could no longer ignore. She remembered fragments from college, brief faces in the crowd, the one person who had always been at the periphery of her world. Nothing overt, nothing intrusive, just there. And now the realization struck. The shadow that had guided her, protected her, whispered when needed, had always been there. Stephania. Her pulse quickened. Not in fear. Not in anger. Recognition. And something more subtle, something unspoken, a tension that threaded through the small, careful gestures Stephania made. Danny sat back, gaze sweeping the room. Stephania entered silently, as always, tablet in hand, calm, poised, the faintest hint of a smile playing on her lips. You've noticed, Stephania said softly, voice like silk across stone. Danny didn't answer immediately. She studied her, realizing she had always been under the watch of a woman she hadn't even known to watch for. Why didn't you tell me? Danny finally asked, tone even but layered with everything she hadn't admitted to herself yet. I promised your father, Stephania replied simply. And some things are better revealed in the right moment. The truth settled like a slow tide, filling spaces Danny hadn't realized were empty. You've been there, all this time, Danny said, more statement than question, feeling the weight of it, the care, the quiet constancy that had silently steered her through the storm. Stephania met her gaze, steady, unwavering. Yes, she said. Always. Danny let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, the first smile breaking across her face in weeks. A shadow had always followed her, yes. But now, for the first time, she saw it in full. And the shadow was someone who had never left her. Chapter 19. Calculated Confessions. The city slept beneath them, lights flickering like distant constellations. Danny sat at the table, working through the latest contingency Stephania had prepared, a network of legal and financial traps designed to keep Vicente's allies off balance. She moved through the data with practiced ease, fingers flying across the keyboard, brain scanning probabilities. Stephania watched her, leaning casually against the doorway, a cup of tea in one hand. The glow of the laptop reflected in her gray eyes. You always do this, Stephania said softly, voice almost teasing. Dive straight into the chaos. Danny didn't look up. It's what I know how to do. Stephania's lips quirked into a faint, knowing smile. And yet, some things can't be solved by logic alone. Danny paused, a cursor hovering midline, sensing the undercurrent in Stephania's tone. Some things, she asked, not turning her head. Yes, Stephania said, taking a slow sip of her tea. Some things require attention you don't notice at first. Small gestures. Patterns. Constant presence. Danny frowned slightly, a thought flickering at the edges of her mind. Her fingers returned to the keyboard, but her eyes flicked to Stephania, reading the subtext, the rhythm of her body, the quiet insistence in her voice. Stephania stepped closer, deliberately, but still not close enough to break comfort. Her voice dropped a notch, intimate but measured. I've been watching you for a long time. Not in the obvious way. Not like a shadow you'd see. But, there. Dani's heart skipped slightly. She didn't flinch. She didn't betray it outright. But an engineer notices patterns, detects anomalies. And this was not random. You always notice patterns, Stephania continued, carefully, teasing, yet you probably didn't see me in them. Dani's fingers hovered again, mid-task, her mind registering this like a line of code she'd missed. Subtlety was part of Stephania's design. And now the design was revealing itself. Stephania's eyes softened fractionally, a small crack in the professional mask. Some things, she said slowly, deliberately, are worth watching longer than necessary. Some people. Dani's pulse quickened. Not a rush, not panic, just the precise recognition of a connection forming. She didn't answer immediately. Engineers analyze first. Feelings can follow. Stephania turned slightly, leaning against the table, letting the silence stretch, letting the tension calibrate. Don't misread this, she said quietly. I'm here because I promised your father, but I've always cared. Enough to plan, enough to wait. You just never noticed. Dani's eyes narrowed slightly, scanning the layers between the words, feeling the invisible wires Stephania had always laid in the background. She didn't know the depth yet, didn't know everything. But she sensed it. And engineers notice patterns. Stephania's voice softened further, almost a whisper, and now that you do, you can decide how to proceed. Dani blinked, returning to her work, but her mind wasn't on contingencies anymore. It was on the careful, deliberate presence that had followed her entire life, now slowly, almost imperceptibly, revealing itself. Stephania watched her return to the laptop, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. One day, Dani would realize just how long she had been the shadow. But for now, it was enough that Dani noticed. Chapter 20: Patterns and Probes. The safe house was quiet except for the low hum of computers and the distant crash of waves. Dani moved like a conductor over her tools, laptop, files, plans, but her mind wasn't on logistics. It was on Stephania. She leaned slightly, eyes narrowing, voice calm but deliberate. You've been here before me, she said, not looking at Stephania directly. In every critical move. Always one step ahead. Stephania's lips curved just faintly. Your father was meticulous. He liked people who anticipated moves. I learned from him. Dani paused, tapping her pen against her notebook. So, tell me, if I did something entirely unplanned, you'd notice? Stephania tilted her head, eyes glinting. Eventually. Dani's gaze shifted sharply, studying the reaction, noting the slight delay, the way her eyes flickered ever so slightly to her hands. Small hesitation. Pattern. An anomaly. Interesting. Eventually. Dani repeated, arching an eyebrow. You always notice everything. That's not eventually. That's now. Stephania smiled faintly. Nothing is immediate. Even shadows take time to be seen. Dani's fingers tapped rhythmically against the desk. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me, letting me probe, letting me try to map the invisible lines you've drawn around me. Yes, Stephania admitted softly. I could intervene. But observing tells me more. You notice what I leave behind. You deduce what I don't say. Dani leaned back, eyes sharp, a slow grin forming. She could feel the thrill of recognition, the engineer in her responding to the puzzle of Stephania. Then let's see, if I do something entirely illogical. Something I know you can't anticipate. Something reckless. Stephania didn't flinch. Her calm remained perfect. Then I'll follow the rules of probability. And watch. Dani studied her carefully. A faint trace of amusement. A flicker of something else connection? Care in the precise lines of Stephania's posture. Every micro-expression catalogued, every reaction analyzed. She smiled slightly. Interesting. So, you do have limits. You're human after all. Stephania's eyes softened fractionally, just enough that Danny caught it, but not enough that she would admit she had. Even humans have strengths, she said quietly. Mine just happens to be patience. Danny's smile deepened. Patience. For me? She asked lightly, almost as a test. Stephania didn't answer immediately. She only let her gaze linger, controlled, calm, but carrying a weight. The kind of weight Danny could feel, but not yet measure. The engineer in Danny logged it, stored it, noted it. There is a pattern here. One worth decoding. And in that silent exchange, they both understood. This wasn't just strategy. This wasn't just survival. This was a slow, deliberate dance. And neither would make the first misstep yet. Chapter 21. Cracks in the Armor. The night was quiet, the hum of the city a distant lullaby. Danny sat cross-legged on the sofa, laptop closed, papers scattered around her like the remnants of a war that had already been fought. Stephania stood by the window, adjusting files on her tablet, the glow painting her in muted silver. Danny spoke first, voice low but curious. You never sleep much, do you? Stephania glanced at her, a faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her lips. I sleep enough. Just not when I'm planning. Danny tilted her head, observing. Her engineer's mind noticed patterns, anomalies. The faint crease near Stephania's eye. The subtle tension in her shoulders. Planning what? For me. Stephania didn't answer directly. Instead, she moved closer, letting her presence fill the space without touching. For things you don't see coming, she said softly. For things you won't ever expect. Danny raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. You've been doing that a lot. Yes, Stephania admitted, almost a whisper. Because you notice everything, except me. Danny laughed softly, almost in disbelief. Except you. She studied her carefully, realizing the words carried weight she hadn't been prepared to measure. There was history there. A quiet devotion that wasn't stated, but threaded into every small act Stephania had taken, every contingency she had set in motion. Stephania's eyes lingered on her, gray and unflinching, yet gentle. I've always watched. From a distance. Never crossed lines. But always there. Danny's mind cataloged the detail, tone, hesitation, timing. And she felt it not in the rational way she processed technical problems, but in a deeper, quieter sense. Something tender, carefully hidden, waiting for recognition. She leaned back, letting the tension stretch. You mean, from college? She asked cautiously. Stephania's lips quirked, just barely. Yes. Always. Even when our paths didn't cross. I was there. Danny's pulse quickened slightly. Not alarm, not fear. Recognition. The engineer in her noted the pattern. Stephania's careful interventions, her presence at critical moments, her perfect timing. And now, the human beneath the strategy. You're subtle, Danny murmured. I learned from the best, Stephania replied softly, her gaze dropping just enough to let the weight of the words settle. And I cared. Enough to wait. Enough to protect. Danny looked at her, measuring, analyzing, and something in her chest warmed. Not love, not yet, but an understanding. A recognition of constancy, devotion, and the quiet courage to reveal pieces of oneself slowly, deliberately. Stephania's eyes met hers again, steady, patient, almost teasing. I'll show you more, when you're ready. Danny's smile was faint, almost dry. I like slow reveals. They last longer. And in that moment, the battle for the city faded slightly into the background. Two forces, equal, careful, tethered by history and necessity, began to notice the gravity between them. Not a declaration. Not yet. Just the first pulse of something inevitable, delicate, and dangerous. Chapter 22. Quiet Gravity. The night was heavy with salt and wind, the city's lights reflecting off the calm waters below. Danny hunched over her laptop, reviewing shipping logs, timing sequences, and contingencies. Every calculation precise. every move deliberate. She had learned long ago to trust no one completely, especially not someone who had been hovering in the shadows her entire life. Stefania moved around her quietly, straightening papers, double-checking data, making small corrections Danny didn't always notice, but her presence was there. Constant. Steady. Like gravity. Danny glanced up. "Do you ever just stop?" she asked lightly, but the edge in her voice betrayed her curiosity. Stefania's eyes met hers briefly, then drifted back to the tablet. "Stop what?" "Everything," Danny said. "Watching. Calculating. Planning." A faint smile tugged at Stefania's lips. "That's not me. That's the part of me your father entrusted with your safety. It's automatic." Danny's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something in Stefania's tone, calm but intimate, pulled at her attention. And yet, trust was not yet hers to give. She leaned back, crossing her arms, still cautious. "Automatic, huh? So, it's not personal?" Stefania didn't answer immediately. She moved closer to the chair, careful not to invade space, and spoke softly. "Maybe a little personal. Maybe enough to care. Enough to notice when you hesitate. Enough to wait." Danny's pulse caught, but she turned her attention back to the screen, forcing herself to catalog Stefania's words as data, not emotion. She had survived by being cautious, by analyzing and observing. This was no different. But Stefania lingered, letting the silence stretch, letting her presence be felt without demanding acknowledgement. A shoulder brushed against Danny's as she passed by to fetch a new file, subtle, almost accidental, but deliberate enough for Danny to notice. Danny's head tilted slightly, catching the movement, noting the precision. A shadow of a smile crossed her lips. "Interesting." Stefania leaned against the table, close enough now that Danny could feel the faint warmth, yet not close enough to be threatening. "You notice everything," Stefania said quietly. "Even when you don't want to." Danny's fingers paused mid-typing. "Even when I don't want to," she repeated softly, almost to herself. The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Stefania stepped back, respecting the distance, but her eyes held Danny's gaze longer than necessary. "I'll be here," she whispered. "Always here. Until you're ready to see it." Danny exhaled slowly, returning to her work, but her mind was no longer entirely on logistics. She noticed the small patterns now, the timing of Stefania's steps, the way she never left the room completely, the quiet ways she ensured Danny's world was safe. Every action deliberate, protective, tethered to something Danny couldn't name yet. And for the first time in her life, Danny felt watched. Not like prey, not like a mark, but like someone else had chosen to care for, quietly, patiently, without asking. She didn't trust fully, not yet. She never would, completely. But the edges of her armor had begun to soften. Just enough for gravity to take hold. Chapter 23. The Empire That Collapsed Quietly. Empires don't always fall with explosions. Sometimes they unravel with paperwork, silence, and timing so precise it feels personal. Danny stood at the center of the operation, posture straight, eyes calm, voice level. No rage. No theatrics. Just execution. "Phase 1, she said. "Now." Stefania didn't look at her tablet. She already knew. Accounts froze across 3 countries. Shell companies folded into themselves like dying stars. Dock masters suddenly discovered audits they'd ignored for years. Judges received files they couldn't unsee. Vicente's remaining allies panicked. That was their first mistake. They called each other instead of lawyers. They moved money instead of hiding. They spoke instead of disappearing. Danny watched the network light up on her screen, nodes blinking red, one by one. "Phase 2, she murmured. Ships were seized mid-route. Containers opened to daylight they were never meant to see. Names surfaced. Old favors rotted in the sun. Stefania leaned closer, voice low. "You're dismantling him faster than your father ever did." Danny didn't smile. "My father tried to save the city. I'm just cleaning it." By dawn, the Sharana Shadow Empire no longer existed. No allies left standing. No money unaccounted for. No one willing to speak Vicente's name out loud. The city exhaled. And for the first time since the handcuffs snapped around her wrists, Danny felt something loosen in her chest. Chapter 24. The House That Remembered Her. The villa stood exactly as she remembered it. White stone warmed by the sun. Ivy climbing stubbornly along the east wall. The gates opened slowly, groaning like they were waking from a long sleep. Danny stepped out of the car and just stood there. No sirens. No cameras. No guards barking orders. Only cicadas and wind and memory. Stephania stayed behind her, respectful, silent, letting this moment belong to Danny alone. Danny walked through the front doors. The house smelled like lemon polish and old books. Her footsteps echoed softly, hers, not escorted, not hurried. She stopped in the center of the main hall and closed her eyes. For the first time since her arrest, she inhaled fully. Her shoulders dropped. Her jaw unclenched. Her breath went all the way down. "Oh," she whispered. "This is what it feels like." Stephania appeared beside her, not touching, just present. "To be home?" Danny nodded slowly. "To not be hunted." She walked through the rooms, the study where her father once argued about ethics and soil, the terrace where she used to read schematics instead of novels, the bedroom where she had packed her bags thinking she was leaving forever. She didn't cry. She breathed. Outside, the late afternoon sun poured gold across the garden. Danny stepped onto the porch and leaned against the railing, eyes closed, face lifted to the warmth. Stephania watched her carefully. "You're safe now," she said quietly. Danny opened her eyes. Looked at her. Really looked at her. "I know," she said. Then, after a beat, softer, "because you were there." Not accusation. Not gratitude. Recognition. Stephania's breath caught, just a fraction, but she said nothing. Danny rested her forearms on the railing, gaze drifting back to the garden. "I don't know how to exist without being on guard," she admitted. "But right now, I think I can try." Stephania stepped closer. Still no touch. Just warmth, just presence. "I'll stay," she said simply. "Not as a shadow. Only if you want." Danny didn't answer immediately. She just breathed again. Deep. Full. Real. Then, "Don't go far." Stephania smiled, not sharp, not triumphant. Soft. Earned. And the villa, old and patient, seemed to settle around them, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment to finally let her rest. Chapter 25. Circling the Truth. The villa was quiet, bathed in the fading orange of late afternoon. Danny sat on the terrace, legs pulled up, notebook open, but her pen hovered, idle. Her mind replayed months of chaos, Vicente's empire dismantled, her father's name cleared, the city finally exhaling. And Stephania. She had been there through it all. Not as a guide, not as an assistant, as herself. Constant. Calm. Careful. Waiting. Danny's chest tightened. She had been trained to analyze, to trust logic over impulse, to be self-sufficient, to survive alone. But she had felt it, that pull, that recognition of someone who had been tethered to her life in ways she hadn't allowed herself to see. She turned slowly. Stephania stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea, quiet as ever. Danny cleared her throat. "We worked well together," she said, voice low, careful. "Better than I expected." Stephania's lips quirked slightly, but her eyes softened. "We do, yes." Danny shifted, uncomfortable in the unfamiliar terrain of emotion. She wanted to test it, define it, contain it. "I notice things," she admitted, finally. "Small things. Timing. Gestures. Presence. You were always there. I just didn't see it." Stephania's gaze lingered on her. Steady. Patient. "You didn't have to." Danny frowned, frustrated with herself. I don't know how to feel about that. I've been a loner my whole life. I trust plans, systems, algorithms. Not people. Not," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Stephania stepped closer, holding the cups, offering without forcing. "Not feelings," she said softly, almost teasing. "I understand. But I don't expect anything. Not now." Danny exhaled sharply, letting herself lean slightly against the railing. Not fully, just enough to let the gravity of Stefania's presence settle. I guess I'm realizing that I don't have to do everything alone. A faint smile tugged at Stefania's lips, just enough to catch Dani's attention. You never have, she said. Quiet. True. No theatrics. Dani turned her gaze back to the horizon, the sea reflecting fire and shadow. And yet, she murmured, voice almost lost to the wind. It's hard to let someone in. Stefania didn't answer immediately. She just stayed there, letting Dani circle the truth, letting her confront it without pressure. After a long pause, she said gently, you can take your time. I'll be here. Always. No rush. Dani exhaled again, letting the tension in her shoulders ease fractionally. She had no words, no declarations, no admissions beyond that single thought. But she felt it, the magnetic pull she had been avoiding. Recognition. Dependence. Something deeper than logic could account for. And for the first time in a long time, Dani allowed herself to feel it without trying to dismantle it, calculate it, or control it. Stefania remained close, a quiet presence, just enough warmth, just enough gravity. Waiting. Patient. Silent. And Dani, careful, cautious, still circling the truth, finally admitted to herself that the shadow she had always ignored had quietly become the center of her world. Not named. Not claimed. Not labeled. Just felt. And that was enough for now. Chapter 26. Gravity between them. The villa hummed softly with evening lamps glowing, the faint scent of jasmine drifting through open windows. Dani moved through the kitchen, preparing a late dinner. Her hands worked with mechanical precision, chopping, stirring, plating. She didn't notice Stefania lingering at the counter, watching her with quiet attention. Not hovering. Not demanding. Just present. Dani glanced over her shoulder, eyebrows slightly raised. You're watching again, she said, lightly teasing, though her voice held a hint of warmth she hadn't meant to reveal. Stefania tilted her head, gray eyes soft but sharp. Observing, she corrected gently. Not watching. There's a difference. Dani smirked, returning to her chopping. I suppose there is. One is threatening. The other, comforting. Stefania allowed herself a faint smile, letting the comment hang. She stepped closer to set a plate on the counter. Their hands brushed just slightly, accidental or deliberate, Dani couldn't tell. The contact lingered longer than normal, and Dani's pulse caught. You're getting better at letting people in, Stefania said quietly, almost to herself. I can see it. Dani's knife paused mid-chop. I wouldn't call it that, she said carefully. I'm just adapting. A silence stretched between them, comfortable and fragile. Stefania didn't speak. She didn't need to. Dani noticed her presence like an anchor, grounding without restraining. Later, in the study, Dani leaned over a map of the city, tracing patrol routes and contingencies. Stefania moved behind her, gently nudging a piece of paper into place. Their elbows brushed, faint, electric. Do you always need to be this close? Dani asked, a hint of irony in her voice, though she didn't move away. Stefania's lips quirked. Only when you might miss something. Dani's fingers stilled over the map. Or maybe you just like being close. Stefania met her gaze, steady and unreadable for a heartbeat. Maybe. Dani returned to her map, but the awareness lingered. Stefania's warmth, the subtle gravity she carried, the way she seemed to exist just outside the perimeter of Dani's defenses. She cataloged it like data, pattern after pattern, but this was data that made her chest tighten. Chapter 27. Shared Silence. The following night, rain tapped softly against the windows. The villa smelled of whetstone and pine. Dani and Stefania sat on the terrace, cups of tea in hand, just watching the water shimmer under the streetlights. No words at first. Just presence. Just the steady rhythm of two people sharing space, letting trust seep in between the small, careful gestures. Dani finally spoke. You never sleep in my room, even when you could, she said quietly. Stefania's hand brushed against her cup. I know my place, she said, softly, almost teasing, but there was warmth behind it. Dani tilted her head. I like that you respect boundaries. But sometimes I wish you didn't. Stephania let that hang, silent, letting the confession settle. Danny exhaled, taking a small sip of tea, eyes distant, yet aware of Stephania's steady presence beside her. I'm not used to letting anyone in. Not really. You don't have to, Stephania said quietly. Not all at once. Danny's gaze flicked to her, noting the calm patience in her expression. She wasn't forcing trust. She wasn't demanding closeness. She was just there. And for the first time, Danny considered letting herself rely on someone, slowly, deliberately. Their knees brushed under the table. A small touch. Brief. Electric. Not claimed. Not named. But it was enough. The night stretched. Rain fell. Tea cooled. And Danny realized that intimacy could be measured in small increments, moments like this, quiet, deliberate, tethered by trust, gravity, and unspoken care. She didn't know where it would go. She didn't need to. For now, this was enough. Chapter 28, Legacy in Motion. The villa's study was quiet, warmed by the late afternoon sun. Danny sat at the desk, blueprints and sketches spread out before her, community plans, technical schematics, funding projections. The kind of work her father would have approved of, the kind of work that would honor Santi's vision. Stephania hovered nearby, tablet in hand, watching her move with the quiet patience she had perfected over months. Danny tapped her pen against the paper, eyes flicking to Stephania. I've been thinking, she began, slow, careful, about how to make sure Santi's work lasts. Not just for a few years, but for generations. Stephania tilted her head. And you want my help? Danny smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. I could do it alone, she said, scanning a blueprint of a new community center with integrated technical training labs. I know the plans, the finances, the implementation. I've done my calculations. I can make it work. Her eyes met Stephania's for just a moment, subtle, almost like a challenge, but softer. But it would be more effective if I had someone I could trust. Someone who understands both the strategy and the human side of it. Someone who's patient. Stephania's lips curved, but only slightly. You're asking me to stay, she said, low measured. Danny's fingers paused over the blueprints. I'm not saying it like that, she replied, letting a faint vulnerability slip. I just want it done right. And I know I can't do that without someone paying attention to the details I miss. Someone who's always there. Stephania stepped closer, closer than usual, letting her presence brush lightly against Danny's space, but still not crossing the invisible line Danny hadn't yet named. I see, she said softly. And you're trusting me to be that person? Danny exhaled, a mixture of relief and apprehension. I'm trusting you to see what I see, and catch what I don't. That's all. A pause stretched between them, the kind heavy with unspoken acknowledgement. Stephania's eyes flickered with the tiniest hint of emotion, devotion, pride, and something deeper, personal. Danny returned her gaze to the blueprints, tapping her pen again, hiding the faint tension in her chest. She didn't say stay with me, and Stephania didn't need the words. The subtle weight of Danny's request, the trust threaded through her tone and posture, said everything. Stephania stepped back, silently accepting. Then we do it right, she said, steady. Together. Danny nodded, a quiet smile crossing her lips. Not one of overt happiness, but of release, of connection. She could do the work alone, but choosing Stephania meant she didn't have to. For the first time, Danny realized that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was legacy. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something more. Chapter 29, The Rhythm of Two. The villa was alive with the faint hum of work and life. Blueprints, spreadsheets, and design sketches sprawled across the long oak table in the study. Coffee cups, half empty, mingled with pens and rulers. Danny leaned over a set of calculations, brow furrowed, muttering softly to herself. Stephania hovered close, never crowding, never stepping over the line, but always close enough for Danny to feel her presence. Check this routing, Danny said, pointing at a series of logistical pathways. If we shift deliveries by 3 hours, we save the crew a week's worth of downtime. Stephania moved to her side, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. The contact was fleeting, deliberate, yet it made Danny's pulse catch. "You're always thinking 10 steps ahead," Stephania said softly, almost teasing. Danny glanced up, lips twitching in amusement. "Someone has to." She shook her head, then let out a small, unexpected laugh, light, genuine, something Stephania hadn't heard in months. Stephania's eyes softened. She let Danny laugh, staying near but not imposing, as if her presence was gravity itself, anchoring Danny without restraint. Later, in the kitchen, they worked side by side, chopping vegetables, arranging trays for the villa staff. Danny hummed under her breath, something almost melodic, and Stephania caught herself smiling at the sound. "Careful with that knife," Stephania said, just a hair's breadth away as she moved to the counter. Her hand brushed Danny's shoulder accidentally. Danny froze for a heartbeat, then shook it off, but a faint warmth lingered where they touched. "You're too close," Danny murmured, teasing but letting her words be softened by the smile tugging at her lips. "I'm helping," Stephania replied, deliberately vague, letting Danny interpret it however she wished. And Danny, for the first time in a long time, let herself go. Not fully, not entirely, but enough to feel the comfort of presence, of companionship, of someone who didn't need to be analyzed or measured, just was. By evening, they returned to the study, sprawled across the floor with maps and plans, markers scattered around like confetti. Stephania leaned over a schematic, just a hair's breadth from Danny, explaining a routing adjustment. Danny's hand drifted just slightly to point something out, brushing Stephania's fingers. Neither pulled back. They laughed together over a miscalculation, soft and unrestrained. Danny's shoulders, so often tense, relaxed. Stephania let her laugh echo, savoring it quietly, watching Danny, the fierce, independent engineer who had survived so much, slowly letting herself enjoy a life she had fought to reclaim. At one point, Danny straightened, looking over Stephania's shoulder at the blueprint. "You know," she said, voice low, teasing, "you make this almost fun." Stephania's eyes met hers, gray and steady, lips just curving. "Almost?" Danny smirked, shaking her head. "Almost." They didn't speak more on it. They didn't need to. Their routine, the shared work, the small touches, the laughter that had begun to punctuate their days, said everything words couldn't. And as night settled over the villa, Danny realized she hadn't just survived the chaos of her uncle's betrayal. She had begun to live again, letting someone in slowly, carefully, deliberately. Stephania had become more than a shadow. She was the gravity that kept Danny grounded, the subtle warmth that let her laugh, and the quiet presence that made the villa feel like home. Chapter 30. Threads of Connection. The morning light spilled across the villa, soft and golden. Danny stood at the terrace, stretching after a light run along the garden paths. Stephania appeared beside her with 2 steaming cups of coffee, moving like she always did, quiet, deliberate, just close enough that Danny felt her presence without being crowded. "Coffee," Stephania said softly, holding out a cup. Her fingers brushed Danny's ever so slightly. Not enough to startle, just enough to make the moment linger. Danny took it, smirk tugging at her lips. "You always know when I need it." "I observe patterns," Stephania said, lips twitching. "You skip breakfast after your run. You frown at weak coffee. You spill sugar when you're distracted." Danny laughed, a light, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. "And yet you still bring it anyway." Stephania's gray eyes softened, just the faintest hint of affection. "I'm nothing if not persistent." Later, in the study, Danny and Stephania sprawled across the floor, blueprints and plans scattered around them. Danny leaned against Stephania slightly, shoulders brushing. She hadn't thought she could ever enjoy leaning on someone else, but here it was, subtle and grounding. "You missed a line," Stephania said, pointing to a routing diagram. Danny reached over to correct it, and their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. Danny caught her breath but let it pass, allowing the contact to linger, fleeting, electric. "Careful," Danny teased lightly. "If you keep touching my hands, I might start trusting you more than I should." Stephania tilted her head, lips quirked in that soft, patient smile. Is that a warning or a confession? Danny snorted quietly. Maybe both. By afternoon, they were in the kitchen, prepping meals for the villa staff and the city's outreach project. Stefania leaned over to reach for a jar of spices, brushing Danny's hair from her neck. Danny froze for a heartbeat, then laughed lightly, letting the warmth of Stefania's presence seep in. You're too close again, Danny murmured, voice teasing but soft. I'm helping, Stefania said, deliberately vague. Danny shook her head, but the corners of her mouth lifted in amusement. For the first time in years, she was allowing herself to enjoy being near someone, small intimacy woven through mundane routines. Evening came, and the villa glowed under lamps and candlelight. They were side by side in the library, reviewing community reports. Stefania pointed to a section in a ledger. Danny leaned in to see better, brushing against her shoulder. Neither moved away. You're getting better at letting people in, Stefania said quietly. Danny's lips pressed into a thin line, almost a smile. I'm not. I'm just, she trailed off, caught off guard by the softness of Stefania's voice and the subtle warmth of her proximity. Stefania let the moment linger. No rush. No pressure. Just the quiet gravity of being near each other, of shared routines, laughter, touches that were almost accidental but entirely deliberate. And as night fell, Danny realized that the villa no longer felt empty, no longer felt like a house she had to reclaim alone. Stefania's presence had threaded into every corner, soft, grounding, playful, intimate. And for the first time in her life, Danny let herself believe she could enjoy this closeness without losing herself. Chapter 31. Comfort in the Ordinary. The villa smelled of bread baking. Danny had insisted on making breakfast herself, claiming she needed practice with the ovens for the community kitchen she was planning. Stefania hovered nearby, leaning casually against the counter, tablet in hand, reviewing blueprints and schedules. Danny glared at her playfully. You're not supervising, are you? Of course not, Stefania said, voice calm, eyes glinting with humor. I'm observing. Observing, Danny repeated, shaking her head. You've been observing me for months. What, are you some sort of quiet guardian angel now? Stefania smiled faintly, moving just a hair closer to reach for a measuring cup. Their fingers brushed lightly. Danny froze for a heartbeat, then went back to stirring the batter, letting the contact linger in her mind longer than in reality. You're not going to melt if I touch your hand, Stefania teased softly, reading the slight blush on Danny's cheek. Danny snorted, rolling her eyes. I'm not melting. But be careful. I might start trusting you too much. Stefania tilted her head, lips twitching. Trust is earned. Danny's grin was faint, but genuine. I think you've earned a little already. Later, they were in the garden, planting seedlings for the community outreach project. Stefania knelt beside Danny, showing her the correct spacing for the young plants. Their knees brushed. Their elbows occasionally bumped. Danny laughed aloud when Stefania teased her for planting one seed crooked. You're lucky these are vegetables and not explosives, Stefania said, smiling. I've survived worse than crooked carrots, Danny shot back, laughing, letting herself enjoy the moment. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows. They paused to admire their work, shoulders touching lightly as they stood side by side. Danny didn't move away. Stefania didn't pull back. The small contact felt deliberate, intimate, grounding. Danny noticed. Her chest warmed slightly. Her shoulders relaxed. And in that ordinary, playful moment, trust settled between them like morning dew. By evening, they were in the study again, sorting paperwork for the outreach program. Danny leaned back in her chair, stretching. Stefania moved behind her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her shoulder. Danny froze for a moment, then exhaled, letting the contact linger. You really are everywhere, she said, half teasing, half in awe. I'm here, Stefania replied softly. Whenever you need me. Danny's lips twitched in a faint, private smile. She didn't have to say it aloud. She didn't have to name it. But she felt it, the quiet, constant presence of Stefania, threading into her life, threading into her routines, threading into her heart. And as the villa settled into night, with lamps glowing warmly and the city quiet beyond the gates, Danny finally allowed herself to lean slightly toward that presence. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to feel the gravity, the warmth, the subtle intimacy that had been building quietly, deliberately, day by day. Chapter 32, Unnamed Gravity. Danny sat in her study late at night, the villa quiet around her. Reports lay half-checked, blueprints rolled beside her, but her pen hovered idle over the papers. She wasn't thinking about work, not really. Her mind kept returning to Stefania. To the way she moved through the villa, quietly, deliberately, always present but never imposing. To the way her laughter had slipped into Danny's day like sunlight through blinds, warm, unassuming, impossible to ignore. To the way her hand brushed Danny's shoulder, knee, fingers, each accidental touch lingering just a heartbeat too long, electric, grounding. Danny exhaled sharply, shaking her head. No, this isn't. I can't, she muttered under her breath, trying to banish the thought. But it came back. Persistent. Relentless. She realized, with a slow, sinking clarity, that she couldn't see her life without Stefania in it. Not her days of work, not the projects, not even the villa itself. Stefania had threaded herself through the routines, the laughter, the small moments of victory and defeat, until she had become inevitable. Danny gripped her pen tighter, jaw tense. I don't even know how to admit it. I can't, not yet. Not out loud. Her chest tightened, a mixture of longing and fear. This was new territory, emotional, uncharted, untamed. Danny had survived wars, betrayals, the collapse of her family empire, the harsh isolation of wrongful imprisonment, but this was something she couldn't calculate, strategize, or engineer. And yet, every plan, every blueprint, every corner of the villa seemed to echo with Stefania's presence. She leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. A quiet, almost imperceptible smile tugged at her lips. I don't have to admit it, yet. But I know. I can't. I won't. Her chest tightened again, but this time it was different. Not panic. Not fear. But the undeniable pull of need, of reliance, of affection she had tried to deny. Stefania was there, always had been, in every small way, and Danny finally realized she didn't want her to leave. Not now. Not ever. Her fingers brushed the edge of a blueprint, tracing lines she had drawn with precision earlier, but now blurred by thought. I can do everything else alone. But not this. Not her. I can't. A quiet determination settled over her. She wouldn't name it. She wouldn't speak it. But she would feel it, allow it to grow, let it anchor her. And for the first time in months, Danny allowed herself a private, tremulous admission. She couldn't imagine a life without Stefania. Not yet a confession. Not yet a declaration. Just recognition. Just gravity. And, sometimes, mi amor, that is enough. Chapter 33, Nights and Days. Danny lay awake in the villa's master bedroom, moonlight spilling across the floor. The villa was quiet, but her mind wasn't. It hadn't been quiet in weeks, not since Stefania had arrived, not since her routines had intertwined with hers. She turned onto her side, staring at the ceiling, fingers twitching restlessly. Thoughts tumbled, one after the other. The faint brush of Stefania's fingers against her hand in the kitchen. The way Stefania's hair fell across her shoulders as she leaned over a blueprint. The soft, unassuming laugh that had slipped into the villa like sunlight she couldn't block. Her chest tightened, a mix of longing and frustration. Why can't I stop thinking about her? She muttered under her breath, voice swallowed by the darkness. Sleep refused her. Hours passed. Shadows shifted across the room. And still, Danny's mind ran in endless loops, tracing every touch, every glance, every quiet moment with Stefania. By day, the effect was undeniable. At the villa, in the study, Danny tried to focus on plans, reports, and schedules, but her hands lingered over the blueprints longer than necessary, tracing lines that now blurred in her distracted mind. Stefania noticed. Always close, always a breath away. Danny caught herself stealing glances, seeing the subtle curve of her lips, the way her eyes caught the light, the patient way she watched her. She tried to work. She tried to engineer, calculate, strategize, but her mind would always wander. Where was Stephanie at that moment? Was she thinking of her too? Had she noticed the way Danny's chest tightened when their fingers brushed? Meetings with local coordinators became exercises in restraint. Danny would catch herself zoning out mid-sentence, imagining Stephania explaining a route adjustment, leaning close just so, her voice soft, measured, deliberate. At night, she would lie awake again, restless. Sometimes imagining Stephania leaning against her shoulder, fingers brushing her arm, just a hair's breadth from a contact Danny couldn't admit she craved. Her work, her meticulous routines, the villa itself, all the things she had fought to control, now felt secondary to the pull of one presence, Stephania. Even her laughter, once free and easy when alone, now came with a hesitation, a glance over her shoulder, a pulse-quickening awareness that Stephania might be watching, near, patient, deliberate. And in the quiet of her sleepless nights and distracted days, Danny realized a truth she wasn't ready to name. Stephania had become the center of her world. Not fully confessed. Not fully admitted. Just known. And the realization both terrified and exhilarated her. Chapter 34. The Question. The study smelled faintly of ink and paper, the soft hum of the villa settling around them. Stephania bent over a report at the desk, eyes scanning lines of figures, occasionally jotting notes. Her gray eyes caught the light from the desk lamp, calm, measured, almost untouchable. Danny paused at the doorway, heart thundering like a drum in her chest. She had walked the villa paths twice, pacing, gathering courage. Now, standing at the threshold, she felt the weight of every unspoken thought, every sleepless night, every distracted day. Her voice, when it came, was a mere breath. On a scale of 1-10, how bad of an idea would it be if I kissed you right now? Stephania didn't look up immediately. She let the question hang, savoring the moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she tilted her head, gray eyes locking with Danny's. A faint smile curved her lips. Totally off the charts, she said, voice teasing, low, playful. I'm in. The words landed between them like fire, playful but daring, electric and intimate all at once. Danny felt herself inhale sharply, the villa, the reports, the world outside the study, all of it falling away until there was only this charged space between them. Stephania's hand moved just slightly closer to the desk's edge, fingers brushing against Danny's without touching, teasing the gravity of proximity. Danny felt it, every microsecond, every hairbreadth distance, her own pulse responding in kind. The air thickened. Playful, teasing, yet undeniably intimate. A spark had been struck, and now, both of them knew that the next heartbeat could tilt everything. Danny's lips parted slightly, a tremor of anticipation passing through her, but she stayed still, letting the moment stretch, savoring Stephania's teasing confidence, the thrill of finally letting herself risk it. Stephania's grin widened faintly, reading the hesitation, the want, the unspoken admission in Danny's eyes. Well, she teased softly, voice a mere whisper now, coaxing, challenging, inviting. Danny swallowed, heart hammering. Well, maybe I'll find out, she murmured. And in that suspended second, the study seemed to shrink, the outside world dissolving, leaving only the pulse of proximity, the hum of possibility, and the first, delicate brush of daring intimacy. Chapter 35. The Dance Before the Kiss. Danny stood at the edge of the study, fingers twitching, mind racing. Every fiber of her being screamed to act, to close the space between them, to bridge the months of teasing proximity, laughter, and shared work with a single, deliberate motion. And yet, she paced. Back and forth across the room, her shoes barely making a sound against the wooden floor. Her chest tightened with anticipation and frustration. Come on, Danny, you can do this. Stephania didn't move from the desk. She watched, gray eyes calm, lips curving in the faintest, most infuriating smile. Pacing won't change the answer, she said softly, voice low, teasing. I'm still in. Danny paused mid-step, eyebrow twitching. You're enjoying this, she muttered under her breath, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her, twitching in a smirk. I thrive on the dramatic, Stephania replied, tilting her head, letting her hair fall just so, brushing the edge of the desk. Makes the eventual outcome so much sweeter. Danny's pace resumed, slower now, deliberate, each step a battle between caution and desire. The room seemed to shrink, every movement Stephania made magnified, every glance slicing through Danny's restraint. You're awfully confident, Danny said, stopping near the doorway, hands clenched loosely at her sides. I like that. Stephania leaned slightly forward, fingers just brushing the edge of the desk, close enough that Danny could imagine their hands touching. Confidence is contagious, she said, voice soft, teasing, coaxing. Or, it can be frightening, depending on who wields it. Danny's lips parted slightly. I think I'm ready, she whispered, though her pulse raced and her knees threatened to buckle. Stephania's grin widened faintly, reading the unspoken admission. Oh, she murmured, stepping just a hair closer, letting the subtle movement carry the weight of promise, challenge, and invitation. Danny swallowed hard, heart hammering, the world outside the study evaporating. She moved forward, tentative, deliberate, every motion a careful negotiation with desire and fear. And then, finally, just as the distance between them narrowed to inches, Danny leaned in slowly, lips brushing Stephania's just barely, tentative, testing, electric. Stephania didn't move away. Instead, she tilted her head, responding to the ghost of a kiss, letting it linger, letting it speak volumes in the silence. Her hand moved subtly to the desk, steadying herself, not breaking the fragile, charged connection. It was brief. It was delicate. But it was enough. A first spark, a bridge from teasing tension to something more undeniable. Danny pulled back slightly, breath shallow, heart pounding. Stephania's gray eyes glimmered with challenge, amusement, and something deeper. You taste like trouble, Stephania teased softly, voice low, playful, magnetic. Danny's lips twitched into a small, breathless smile. Good, she whispered. I like trouble. And in that suspended moment, the study seemed to hum, alive with the promise of what could come, as the slow, deliberate dance of desire and intimacy continued, one teasing step at a time. Chapter 36. Teasing Aftertaste. Danny stepped back slightly, heart still hammering, lips tingling from the brief, tentative brush. She tried to regain composure, straighten her posture, focus on anything else. But Stephania's gray eyes held her captive, amused, teasing, and a fraction of a challenge that made Danny's chest tighten. You're awfully quiet, Stephania said softly, voice low and deliberate, letting the words hang between them. That little peck, are you sure it was enough to satisfy you? Danny blinked, cheeks warming. As satisfied, she stammered, trying to reclaim some dignity, but failing spectacularly as Stephania's lips curved in that teasing half-smile, that half-grin that always left her guessing. Yes, Stephania replied, tilting her head slightly, letting a single strand of hair fall across her face. You don't get to hide behind walls when your lips just confessed. Danny's pulse quickened, a nervous laugh escaping her. Walls, lips. I'm not hiding, she said, though her voice betrayed her. Stephania leaned ever so slightly closer, the faintest of inches, enough for Danny to feel the warmth radiating from her. Are you sure? She whispered, teasing, daring, playful. Because I can do more than a peck, you know. Danny's breath caught. Her rational mind engineer, strategist, soldier, scrambled to recalibrate. But her chest, her pulse, the way Stephania's presence wrapped around her senses, that wasn't logic. That was gravity. Desire. Something she hadn't named yet, but couldn't ignore. Danny faltered, swaying slightly, caught in Stephania's teasing orbit. Maybe that wasn't enough, she admitted finally, voice low, reluctant and charged. Stephania's eyes glimmered with victory and amusement, but her voice softened just a fraction, low and intimate. Good, she murmured, because I don't intend to stop at a peck. The study seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with anticipation. Every laugh, every brush of a hand, every teasing glance became a pulse of its own, electric, playful, intimate. Danny realized she didn't want control. She wanted Stefania's teasing, her challenge, her presence. She wanted it all. And Stefania, patient, deliberate teasing, knew it. Chapter 37. Claiming the Space. Danny froze, pulse hammering as Stefania stepped forward, closing the gap between them in measured, deliberate strides. Every step carried intent. Every movement whispered the months she had waited, watching, waiting, calculating, knowing that the moment would come. Stefania's gray eyes locked on Danny's, the teasing light still there, but beneath it something deeper, certainty, desire, and ownership of this fragile, delicious tension. "You've been pacing long enough," Stefania murmured, voice low, melodic, coaxing, commanding all at once. She reached for Danny, hand brushing her arm, steadying her against the pull of the moment. Danny's breath hitched. Her mind screamed, "Don't, don't," and yet every rational thought fell away under the weight of Stefania's proximity, the warmth radiating from her, the deliberate gravity of her presence. "Let me show you," Stefania whispered, leaning just close enough for their foreheads to nearly touch, "what truly is between us, Daniela Sofia Sharana." Danny's name on Stefania's lips sent a shiver down her spine. She could barely draw a breath. Every nerve felt alive, every thought reduced to the pull, the heat, the inevitability of this moment. Stefania's hands found Danny's, fingers intertwining with a casual confidence that was anything but casual. She guided Danny closer, teasing, testing, letting her feel the weight of intention, the quiet authority of someone who had waited long enough and now claimed what had always been theirs. You've been here all along," Danny whispered, voice trembling as Stefania's lips hovered just a breath from hers. "I just didn't see." Stefania pressed gently, a teasing brush of lips against Danny's, soft, deliberate. "You never had to," she murmured. "I've always been watching. Waiting. And now you're finally here, within reach." Danny's knees weakened slightly, breath shallow, chest rising and falling too fast. Her hands gripped Stefania's just enough to anchor herself, but she didn't pull away. She didn't resist. She couldn't. Stefania leaned closer, the playful teasing now fused with a deliberate, undeniable pull, letting Danny feel the full weight of her intention, the inevitability of what had been waiting all along. And for the first time, Danny realized she didn't want to escape. She didn't want to hold back. She wanted Stefania, every teasing, every challenge, every deliberate step forward. She wanted this, now. Chapter 38. The Surrender. The study seemed to shrink, the world outside dissolving. Every sound, the soft hum of the villa, the distant night air, faded until there was only the electricity between them. Stefania's gray eyes held Danny's, teasing and commanding all at once, the months of waiting reflected in that steady, unflinching gaze. Danny's chest heaved, hands gripping Stefania's as if the weight of the world had condensed into the simple, magnetic pull of her. Her lips parted slightly, breath shaky, anticipation coiling tight in her stomach. Stefania closed the last inches, tilting her head, lips brushing Danny's slowly at first, gentle, deliberate, testing. A soft sigh escaped Danny before she even realized she'd exhaled, and Stefania responded by deepening the kiss just a fraction, letting their lips press together with a careful intensity that left nothing unsaid. Danny's fingers found Stefania's hair, weaving through the dark strands, tugging her slightly closer, letting go of every restraint she'd clung to for months. Stefania's hands pressed against Danny's sides, anchoring her, guiding her, yet leaving her room to melt into the surrender. The kiss deepened, slow and unrelenting, playful teasing giving way to heat, to the undeniable pull that had been growing between them. Danny's mind went blank, the meticulous strategist, the loner, the naval engineer, all of her calculated self replaced by instinct, desire, and the overwhelming need to close the space between them completely. Stefania's lips moved with deliberate precision, claiming, coaxing, inviting Danny to let go fully. And she did. No words. No hesitation. Just surrender. When they finally parted, breath mingling, foreheads resting together, both were flushed, hearts racing, and the room hummed with the residue of intimacy, playful, deliberate, and fully surrendered. Stephania's lips curved into a faint, triumphant smile. Finally, she murmured, voice low, teasing, satisfied. About time you realized. You've always been mine. Dani's chest rose and fell, eyes fluttering open, lips curving into a shy, breathless smile. Maybe. I'm starting to get that, she whispered, voice trembling yet full of a new certainty. And in that quiet, charged space, they stayed close, hands intertwined, breathing together, the slow, deliberate intimacy they had been building for months finally realized, yet knowing this was only the beginning. Chapter 39. No Walls. The study, once a place of work and quiet distance, became theirs. The air thickened with heat, their breaths mingling, heartbeats hammering in unison. Stephania leaned close, lips pressing firmly against Dani's again, this time with no hesitation, teeth brushing tenderly, playful nips, claiming, coaxing, guiding. Dani's hands roamed freely, memorizing the curves, the warmth, the pulse of Stephania beneath her fingers. Every subtle movement, every sigh, every shiver that passed between them stoked the fire, pulling them deeper into the gravity of the other. Stephania responded in kind, fingers tracing lines of heat across Dani's sides, hands brushing daringly over shoulders and back, marking the territory that had been hers in patience and longing for months. Every touch was deliberate, every press and pull teasing, coaxing, commanding, letting Dani feel the inevitability of this surrender. Their lips met again, fierce now, slow and deliberate, tasting, claiming, exploring. Teeth nipped, tender yet daring, breath hitching with every press. Dani's hands threaded through Stephania's hair, tugging gently, pulling her closer, wanting her impossibly near. Stephania groaned softly against Dani's lips, pressing them together as though anchoring herself to the storm of need she had long restrained. She traced Dani's jawline with her fingers, thumb brushing over lips, guiding, testing, claiming. Dani's resolve melted. She couldn't hold back, didn't want to. Every careful wall she had built, her discipline, her control, dissolved under the weight of Stephania's deliberate, consuming presence. They moved together, bodies aligning naturally, every touch, every caress, every kiss a deliberate exploration, a marking of shared territory. Their breaths came in shallow, mingled gasps, heartbeats echoing in tandem. Finally, in a moment suspended in time, Stephania found the subtle curve, the hidden vulnerability, the place that made Dani tremble, sigh, and completely yield. A shiver ran through Dani's body as she pressed fully into Stephania, surrendering without hesitation, without fear, with every part of herself finally acknowledging what had been undeniable all along. Stephania captured her fully, lips, hands, and presence, a title pull Dani couldn't resist. Their bodies, breaths, and hearts fused in a slow, deliberate surrender, playful teasing replaced by unrestrained intimacy, claiming, and devotion. When they finally parted, only for a heartbeat, foreheads resting together, the room hummed with the echo of their surrender. Eyes locked, breaths mingling, hearts racing, they had crossed the threshold into something infinite, tender, magnetic, and wholly theirs. Stephania's lips curved in a soft, triumphant smile. There, she whispered, voice low, intimate. Now you understand, there's no going back. Dani exhaled shakily, bodies still pressed to Stephania's, mind and heart caught in the quiet storm of need and fulfillment. I don't want to, she admitted, voice trembling, breathless, entirely surrendered. And in that charged, intimate space, nothing remained between them, no hesitation, no walls, only the slow, deliberate intertwining of bodies, hearts, and desire, marking the beginning of a love fully claimed, fully realized, and wholly unstoppable. Chapter 40. On the Couch. Stephania guided Dani toward the couch, every movement deliberate, magnetic. Dani's chest rose and fell rapidly, pulse racing with anticipation, desire, and the raw thrill of surrendering completely. Stephania sank onto the couch first, beckoning Danny with a tilt of her head, lips curved in a slow, victorious smile. "Come," she whispered, voice low, intimate, coaxing. "Let me show you what being truly close feels like." Danny's breath hitched. She let Stephania pull her down until she was settled beside her, their thighs touching. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her. Stephania's hand rose, her fingers tracing the line of Danny's jaw with a tenderness that belied the intensity in her dark eyes. She cupped Danny's cheek, her thumb stroking softly over her skin. "For so long," Stephania murmured, her gaze dropping to Danny's lips, "I've imagined this." She leaned in, closing the distance with agonizing slowness. Stephania's tongue teased Danny's lips, seeking entrance, and Danny parts for her, their tongues entwining in a dance as old as desire itself. The taste of Stephania floods her senses, a heady mix of wine and woman that leaves Danny breathless and wanting more. The kiss deepened, a slow, searching kiss that stole the air from Danny's lungs and sent her thoughts scattering. Danny's hands found their way to Stephania's waist, gripping the soft fabric of her blouse as if anchoring herself. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Stephania's eyes were dark with desire. "Let go, Danny," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "Just for me." Her fingers moved to the buttons of Danny's shirt, her touch unhurried, reverent. Each button undone was a small ceremony, revealing more skin to the warm lamplight. Stephania's lips followed the path of her hands, replacing the cool air with a brand of heat. She kissed the hollow of Danny's throat, the curve of her collarbone, each touch a silent promise. Danny's head fell back against the velvet, her eyes fluttering shut as a wave of pure sensation washed over her. Her hands slid from Stephania's waist, one tangling in her dark hair, the other tracing the strong lines of her back. Stephania's hands slide lower, fingers grazing the waistband of Danny's pants, and with a practiced touch, she undoes the button, zipper sliding down with a soft hiss. Danny's breath catches as Stephania's fingers slip beneath the fabric, tracing the curves of her hips, her inner thighs, the flirting at the heat of her core. Danny whimpers, her hips rolling into Stephania's touch, seeking more of that exquisite friction. Stephania obliges, her fingers delving deeper, stroking and circling until Danny is trembling, her climax building like a crescendo. Danny's fingers fumbled with the buttons of Stephania's own blouse, her movements clumsy with need. Stephania helped her, her own hands working to rid Danny of the last of her clothing. Soon, barriers fell away, and there was only the soft glide of skin on skin, the warmth of their bodies pressing together. Stephania shifted, urging Danny to lie back against the plush cushions. She hovered over her, her hair falling like a dark curtain around their faces, her eyes holding Danny's captive. Danny's chest rose and fell rapidly, her pulse a frantic bird in her throat. She felt utterly seen, utterly known, and the vulnerability was an ecstasy. "Stephania," Danny whispered, her voice breaking on the name. "I know," Stephania soothed, her body lowering, her skin a warm, solid weight. "I know." Her touch became more purposeful, a masterful exploration that erased any lingering shyness in Danny. One hand cupped the swell of Danny's breast, her thumb circling a taut nipple until Danny gasped, her back arching off the couch. At the same time, Stephania's other hand slid down, over the trembling plane of Danny's stomach, lower still. Her fingers were knowing, patient, finding the slick, swollen heart of Danny's desire with unerring accuracy. A low cry was torn from Danny's throat. Her hips bucked instinctively, seeking more of the dizzying pressure. Stephania's touch was a perfect, maddening rhythm, her fingers moving with a fluid, expert grace that pushed Danny relentlessly toward the edge. Stephania watched her, her own breath coming in ragged pants, her expression one of fierce concentration and adoration. "Look at me, Danny," Stephania commanded, her voice a raw murmur. "Stay with me." Danny forced her eyes open, locking her gaze with Stephania's. It was her undoing. Seeing the raw emotion, the fierce desire etched on Stephania's face as she pleasured her, was the final key. The coil of pleasure in Dany's core tightened unbearably. Stephania, I can't. Don't, Stephania breathed, her movements becoming more insistent, her own hips rocking against Dany's thigh in a silent echo of their rhythm. Let it happen. I'm right here. And with a final, deliberate swirl of her thumb, Stephania pushed her over. The climax ripped through Dany, a blinding wave that started at her core and radiated out to every nerve ending. She cried out, her body arching, her fingers digging into Stephania's shoulders as the world dissolved into pure, white light. The clenching of Dany's body, the raw sound of her release, sent a powerful tremor through Stephania. The exquisite tension that had been building within her for months finally snapped. With a low, guttural cry that was almost a sob, her own body shuddered violently, her head dropping into the curve of Dany's neck as her own climax tore through her, a perfect, crashing wave that crested with Dany's. For a long moment, they lay entangled, slick with sweat, their hearts pounding a frantic, syncopated rhythm that slowly, eventually, softened into one. Stephania's weight was a comforting anchor, her breath warm against Dany's skin. Dany's fingers traced idle, trembling patterns on Stephania's back, her body humming with a deep, resonant satisfaction. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound and beautiful stillness. Chapter 41. After the storm. The study was silent, save for their breaths, shallow and mingling, hearts still hammering in unison. Dany leaned against Stephania, head resting lightly on her shoulder, eyelids heavy but unwilling to close just yet. The warmth between them was intoxicating, electric, yet calm, a quiet aftermath after a storm of teeth, lips, hands, and whispered names. Stephania's fingers trailed lazily along Dany's arm, thumb brushing her skin in delicate, soothing circles. Every movement was deliberate, intimate, claiming yet tender, a reminder of what had passed and what had been solidified in that surrender. "You're quiet," Stephania murmured, voice low, teasing, soft enough to make Dany's pulse quicken again. Dany tilted her head up, lips just brushing Stephania's jaw. "I'm taking it in," she whispered, trying to remember it all, without forgetting a second. Stephania smiled, pressing a kiss to Dany's temple, soft, lingering, deliberate. "Remember it, yes," she said. "And no, I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to hold back anymore." Dany's hands moved over Stephania's back, memorizing, tracing, lingering. Every gentle press of her palm against Stephania's body was a silent acknowledgement of trust, desire, and surrender. Her lips curved into a tired, breathless smile. "I think I could get used to this," she murmured, voice soft, intimate. Stephania chuckled, low, satisfied, and pressed another soft kiss to Dany's lips. "Good," she whispered, playful now, teasing in that way that always left Dany breathless. "Because this is only the beginning. And now I get to remind you every day." Dany shivered lightly at the words, curling closer, resting against Stephania, letting herself fully relax for the first time in months, perhaps years. No walls, no hesitation, no fears. Just warmth, closeness, and the quiet, overwhelming satisfaction of being claimed, known, and wanted. They lingered there, on the couch, breathing together, small touches brushing across skin, fingers intertwining, occasional gentle kisses, the world outside fading completely. The villa hummed around them, quiet witnesses to their surrender, a sanctuary for the intimacy they had finally allowed themselves to claim. Stephania's lips brushed Dany's once more, soft, deliberate. "You can sleep now," she whispered, teasing yet tender. "Or we can stay like this for as long as we want." Dany smiled softly, eyes half closed, heart finally calm yet still beating fast. "Let's stay," she breathed. "For as long as we want." And so, they did, tangled, tender, and intimate, letting the quiet aftermath of their surrender wrap around them like a warm, endless embrace, the first night of many where nothing would hold them back, nothing could come between them, and the slow, deliberate building of love and trust could continue without fear. Chapter 42. Rhythm of Us. The villa hummed with life. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching dust motes in lazy beams, painting golden lines across the study where Stefania and Danny sat side by side. Maps, blueprints, and plans for community projects sprawled across the table, but neither seemed focused on the chaos of paper. Their eyes kept finding each other, hands brushing, a small touch here, a shared laugh there. Danny traced a line on the map of Medina Sidonia with her finger, glancing up at Stefania. If we rebuild the school in the old district first, the foundation will reach more kids than we expected, she said, voice steady, confident, the strategist and engineer she had always been, now tempered by a softness only Stefania could coax out of her. Stefania leaned closer, shoulders brushing against Danny's. I trust your judgment, she murmured, thumb brushing Danny's hand. But you do know I like being involved, right? I don't just want to watch you run this town. Danny's lips curved in a soft, mischievous smile. I was hoping you'd say that, she replied, letting her hand linger over Stefania's a moment longer, subtle but intimate. Their fingers intertwined naturally, a quiet rhythm they had fallen into without realizing. After hours of planning, visits to construction sites, and meetings with allies who had once rallied around Santi's vision, they returned to the villa, tired but satisfied. Stefania leaned against the doorway, watching Danny make tea in the kitchen, sunlight glinting off her auburn hair, the faint curl at the nape of her neck catching Stefania's attention. You know, Stefania said softly, stepping closer, letting her hand rest lightly on Danny's shoulder. Watching you work like this, it's unfair. You're brilliant and stubborn and somehow still ridiculously attractive. Danny froze for a moment, turning, eyes wide but lips twitching in a smile. And you keep finding ways to say things that make me forget how to be normal? Stefania chuckled, brushing a stray hair from Danny's forehead, thumb grazing her cheek. I prefer making you distracted, she teased. You're mine now, after all. Danny's laughter rang out, warm and unguarded, echoing through the villa for the first time in months. You are insufferable, she said, shaking her head, but the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her amusement. She stepped closer, pressing a soft kiss to Stefania's lips, quick, teasing, lingering just enough to remind Stefania that she was still very much hers. The evening settled over them, quiet and gentle. On the couch, on the porch, in the kitchen, their hands brushed, their fingers intertwined, whispered jokes and touches threading seamlessly into shared routines. Work on Medina Sidonia's revival became their mission, but also their dance, small glances across the table, soft laughter, fingers brushing as they passed documents, and kisses stolen between conversations. Sometimes, when Danny paused to consider the next step in rebuilding her father's vision, Stefania would trace a gentle line along her arm, a silent affirmation that she was there, present, constant. And Danny, for the first time in her life, allowed herself to rely on that presence, to let it anchor her while still standing tall, still leading with vision and heart. By nightfall, when the plans were laid out, the villa's quiet except for the distant hum of the city, they curled together on the couch. Stefania's fingers wove through Danny's hair, brushing her lips along her temple, along her jaw. Danny rested her head on Stefania's chest, listening to the steady heartbeat beneath, feeling the quiet intimacy of two lives intertwining completely. I think Santi would be proud, Danny whispered, eyes half closed, voice soft. Not just of the work we're doing, but this, she said, letting her hand rest over Stefania's. Us. Stefania pressed a kiss to the top of her head, warm, soft, certain. He would, she murmured. And I promise, we'll make sure his legacy thrives. Together. They stayed there, wrapped in quiet, tender intimacy, their love, their laughter, and their shared vision for Medina Sidonia entwined, a rhythm they had finally found and one they would never let go. Epilogue, Legacy and Light. The sun rose over Medina Sidonia, casting golden light across the restored streets, the new schools, and the community gardens where children laughed freely. The city that had once carried the weight of secrets and betrayal now thrived, its heartbeat steady and strong, alive with promise. In the villa, the study smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Stephania leaned against the doorway, watching Danny adjust plans on a fresh blueprint, eyes scanning every detail with meticulous care. Their hands brushed occasionally, fingers intertwining without thought, a quiet, unspoken affirmation of presence and trust. Danny looked up and smiled, eyes sparkling with both pride and affection. "We did it," she whispered, voice warm. "Not just the city, but us too." Stephania stepped closer, brushing a strand of auburn hair behind Danny's ear, lips brushing her temple in a soft, intimate kiss. "Yes," she murmured. "And this is just the beginning." Danny laughed softly, a rich, unguarded sound, the kind of laugh that had once been rare in her life. She traced Stephania's jaw with a gentle fingertip, leaning close. "You've been here all along, haven't you?" she asked, voice low, teasing yet tender. Stephania smiled knowingly, gray eyes glimmering with warmth and quiet triumph. "Always," she said simply. "Watching. Waiting. And now, we're finally here." They moved to the balcony, stepping into the early morning light, the city sprawling below them, alive with possibility. Children ran in the streets, elders tended gardens, neighbors greeted one another with warmth. Luis Miguel's vision had survived, not because of one person, but because the heart of Medina Sidonia had found its champions. Stephania wrapped an arm around Danny, pulling her close, letting her lean against her. Danny rested her head on Stephania's shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon, chest rising and falling with quiet contentment. "I can see it now," Danny murmured. "Everything Sandy wanted, it's here. And we'll keep it alive. Together." Stephania pressed a soft kiss to Danny's hair, letting her warmth seep into the quiet morning. "Together," she echoed. "Every step, every dream, every moment." And there, with the city humming below, sunlight casting a golden glow across their entwined forms, they let themselves simply be lovers, partners, guardians of a legacy, and, finally, home in each other's arms. No walls. No hesitation. No past to haunt them. Just love, purpose, and the steady, unshakable knowledge that they had found not only each other, but a life worth every risk, every heartbeat, every surrendered moment. The world outside had changed, the shadows had faded, and in the heart of the villa, the two of them smiled, laughed, and whispered promises that would last a lifetime. And for the first time in a long while, Danny exhaled fully, letting herself live and love without restraint. Years passed. Sunlight filters through the tall windows of the villa. Stephania and Danny sit at the breakfast table, hands brushing as they reach for the coffee pot at the same time. Both chuckle softly, eyes locking in that quiet, intimate way they've shared for years. Outside, the city hums, children running to school, neighbors tending gardens they helped plant, a life blooming from Santi's vision. In the community gardens, Danny crouches to show a group of children how to plant seeds, her fingers smudged with soil. Stephania stands behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, chin resting on Danny's shoulder, whispering playful remarks about her serious teaching style. Danny laughs, head tilting back to meet Stephania's gaze. Their closeness is effortless, like breathing. The villa's balcony glows with twilight. Danny sketches plans for a new school while Stephania lounges beside her, feet brushing Danny's, a soft hum of music in the background. They steal glances, fingers tracing each other absent-mindedly, lips brushing in fleeting kisses. No words are necessary. Their routine, their rhythm, their intimacy speaks volumes. At the inauguration of a new community center, Danny gives a speech, confident and proud, Stephania standing beside her with a warm, protective hand on her back. The crowd applauds, children cheer, and the villa staff smile knowingly. Later, away from the crowd, Stephania pulls Danny close, whispering, "Still mine, after all these years." Danny smiles, lips brushing Stephania's in a soft, lingering kiss. Always. Night has fallen over the villa. Candles flicker across the living room as Danny and Stephania sit intertwined on the couch, wine in hand. Their laughter floats softly, gentle touches across arms and shoulders, and occasional kisses, playful and tender. Outside, the city rests, alive yet peaceful, a reflection of the life they've built together. Love fully claimed, legacy fully honored. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.